About the slight delay, just sorting a few things out. Again, just acknowledging Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, and I'm not too sure if translation will be required today. If it hasn't been, no, we haven't. There's been no request, but we acknowledge warmly our endeavours during the day to use and support the use of Māori in the chamber. I also want to acknowledge, and Councillor Philippine has just reminded me, that today is the 75th anniversary of Women in the Police, and several of us had been invited to various celebrations around the region. Sadly, we're here, but I think it is quite a momentous milestone that should be recognised, particularly to our extraordinary women in the police today. Now, apologies. We've got apologies from Councillor Cooper, absence, Councillor Brewer, Sir John and Wayne for lateness, and Councillor Clough for early departure. I'm happy to move those. Someone would second that. Councillor Clough, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
We need to do that. It's sort of, I know that it's early in the morning, but that's appreciated. Against, carried. Declarations of interest. There are no declarations.
Madam Chair,
So
I will not take part in the approval of plan change for the Matakana Country Park.
Matakana Country Park for Councillor Webster. Noted.
Item 11.
Good. Confirmation of minutes. I'll move the confirmation of minutes for the 4th of July. Councillor Penrose will second. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Petitions, there are none. Now, public input, you'll note that we were going to have public input from Michael Wood and the Puke Tāpapa Board, as well as a couple of members of the public on the Liston Village issue. That issue has now been withdrawn temporarily. Michael's requested that we deal with this at a later date. They're still working on it, and we'll wait for it to come back to us. And we've got Simon Randall, who's asked to speak on the Tamaki project and East-West Link, and I think, Simon, it might be best just to do it at those agenda items. It will make much more sense. Extraordinary business, there is none. Notices of motion, none. And the next item then is reports pending, which is item 9.
Move 9.
Peter, second that. Thank you, Councillor Darby. Any questions, issues? No. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 It's carried.
Move 10.
And 10. I'll second that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Councillor Darby. Now, 11. So Councillor Webster will stand aside from item 11. We've got 2 plan changes, item 11 and item 12. Thank you. Warren.
Good morning, councillors. Plan change, the 2 plan changes you've got here are pretty much the last 2 operative plan changes that I will have to do until the unitary plan becomes operative itself. So some of these, so these are 2 legacy plan changes. The first one is Matakana Country Park, which...
Warren, can you pull the speaker across?
This one.
Pull the speaker.
Oh, sorry. Which, after a fairly long and protracted plan change process and appeal process, has finally been settled. So the change really provides for the activities which happen at the Matakana Country Park, which is just out of Matakana, a few kilometres out. Farmers market, museum and so on. Those activities will continue, and there will be some limited development of the site for visitor accommodation, and that's been the area that that has taken a wee while to get sorted. So that is now done. The Environment Court has approved a consent order, and it is now ready for you to formally approve the plan change, and we can make it operative. I should also say that a similar precinct on this, exactly on this spot, takes the same provisions, and the council position is that that goes into the unitary plan.
It's really clear.
Happy to move it, Madam
Someone
Chair.
happy to move?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Penrose, seconded. Councillor Walker.
I didn't want to second it.
Oh, you didn't want to second it?
I just wanted to speak.
Okay.
Here we go.
I'll second it.
Councillor Philip will second. Did you have a question, Councillor Walker?
Not a question, just a very brief comment. And really, this is an instance of a long-running development that started in a rather small way, and through accretion and addition and numerous approaches via the Rodney District Council, has its present status. It is a development that frankly is of a size and character that should never have been in this location, but that's the sort of thing that happened under the Rodney District Council. That's all I wanted to say.
Fair enough. We note your comments, Councillor. However, driving past it most weekends, it's loved and well used and thriving. So it's been moved and seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And our second one, you as well, Warren.
So the second one is a small residential development at Dawson's Road near, which is on the edge of Snell's Beach. It was a private plan change. It's been through all of its processes. It had some hiccups, I guess, along the way as we sorted out potential sewage in an area where there wasn't a lot of capacity at all there. So an interim solution's been agreed, and that was probably the key issue. So that has been through its plan change process. No appeals were received. Again, we have ensured that the same provisions have been proposed for the unitary plan, so that even though this operative plan has a life of maybe a few weeks, it will continue into the unitary plan. So again, all the process has gone through, and it is now there for you to make the final stamp of approval.
I'm happy to move, Madam
Happy
Chair.
to
This is
move.
right opposite the new primary school, so it makes sense. And I haven't had anything to do with this one.
Thank you, Councillor Webster. Seconded, Councillor Walker?
No, didn't want to
Nope,
second.
not second.
Just had a
Councillor.
just had a
Councillor
question, Madam
Penrose.
Chair.
That's fine.
Didn't you?
Roughly in terms of reserve for this development, what are we looking at in percentage terms in reserve area?
I couldn't tell you that
Right opposite
precisely.
the
I'm
reserve.
happy to find that information out. I think it is adjacent to.
It's right opposite a reserve, which is next to the school.
Through you, Madam Chair, I was talking to the officer.
Councillor, yes, and I'm aware of that. On the other hand, if the officer didn't have the information available and someone else did, that's not.
But that wasn't
that's
the
not
information I was
unhelpful.
after.
Okay.
My question was, what is the amount of reserve associated that is integral to this development?
Okay.
Not a reserve that happened to be already there.
Okay.
It would be interesting to know.
So
That-
I'm
that
happy
information
to
can
find that
come back to
information
you.
out and let you know.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's been moved and seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
They're rocking
Thank you. Thanks, Warren.
This is.
So we're now up to items 13 and 14.
Happy to move 13.
Okay, what we were going to do for 13 and 14 is just remind people briefly, and thank you, we'll note that, Councillor Watson. We just thought it would be good to remind people of the process that's being proposed, which kind of covers both items. So if Councillor Watson's happy to move, is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
For his, Councillor Webster, and we'll just park that, quickly take the process discussion, and then we'll go back to the recommendation.
Right, thank you. What we're going to do is a bit of an introduction of the process itself to be gone through, and then we've got these two particular projects, the Northern Corridor improvements and the East-West link. And Paulina Wythes will take you through the East-West link, and I'll take you through the Northern Corridor one. So, I don't know where this is. So I guess firstly, this is particularly about the process that the NZTA wants to use to go through a consenting process, consenting and designations. So a letter has come in from the Environmental Protection Authority, and a number of councillors will recall that we've done these EPA processes several times now. We've gone through it for Waterview, for the Wirri Correctional Facility, for the Puhoi to Wellsford Rons. I think those are the three. Yep. So there are, so many of you will know about the process, and some of you will have participated. So the beginning of the process is that they write to us asking our views on whether the project is of national significance, whether it should be referred to a board of inquiry, or whether it should go as a direct referral to the Environment Court, or whether it should be processed as normal by council. So that's the letter that we always get. They also ask us, in the event that the Minister proceeds with a board of inquiry process, whether we might have any suggestions for a board of inquiry members to sit on that. So those are the questions that we're asking for both of these projects, or that we're answering, hopefully, for both of these projects. So it's very much a process part, although we'll give you a little bit of content just to help make those decisions. But the real merit considerations, is the project good, are there improvements that can be made or whatever, that comes later on, and we'll have that chance later, and we'll come back to you with a report on that. So the processes that we go through, so as I said, there's three options here: the normal council process, the direct referral, and the Environmental Protection Agency process. The council process, up on the screen at the moment, you'll recognise that as the way that a normal set of designations and resource consent applications are followed. And that can take a bit of time. There's the notification, the hearings, the decision if it's a resource consent, or the recommendation if it's a notice of requirement, and then the requiring authority, in this case it would be NZT, confirms that, and then you get to appeals in the Environment Court. So it's quite a lengthy process for a designation. The second option is the direct referral to the Environment Court, where again the application's lodged with the council, we call for submissions, and at that point the council or the hearings committee in this stage says, yes, we'd like it to be direct referred. So there's an application made there, so it goes directly to the Environment Court. And we have had some projects go through that. The third option, which the EPA is asking us about, is this is the actual EPA process. And you'll see there in the series of boxes, first of all, I guess first of all it's around lodging the application, and they would do that as per normal. So it's lodged with the EPA, and then within 20 working days the EPA has to make a recommendation to the Minister as to whether or not to make a recommendation that it does become an EPA project. So the EPA makes that recommendation to the Minister. The Minister doesn't actually have a time frame to decide on that, but he does have to, he's got a duty to avoid unreasonable delay, so he would make that within a week or two. Then the EPA notifies the proposal, and that starts the clock ticking. Once that is publicly notified, there is 9 months to get through the process. And so that means that it's notified before it gets to a hearing. The EPA may have public meetings for submitters. It has done in the past. It could have a friend of submitters who helps people with their submissions, and usually that's an independent consultant. It may even run pre-hearing meetings and mediation and so on. So that leads on to the hearing, and then the Board of Inquiry makes its draft decision. And the nice thing about that, I think, is that it makes a draft decision, and then it gives all the submitters 20 working days to review that decision and see if there are if they've got any comments on it. And for example, a decision may need to be tweaked a bit to make it a little more practical or something like that. So that's the point of the going from the draft decision to the final decision, and then there are only appeals relating to points of law. So it's reasonably fast, and I guess the important thing about this process is that you really need to have all of the information up front at the beginning. It's a fast process, but if everyone's got the information and everyone can use a friend of the submitter type process to help them make their submission, then it goes smoothly. So that's one, and so I guess also in relation to being comprehensive, both of these projects have already been consulted on. They've been out there in the public. I think East West Link's been consulted on with the public a couple of times, and for the Northern Corridor, it's in its second round at the moment, and that closes on Friday. So our local boards will have been informed about it. Our local councillors, I think, will have been informed about it. So it's really trying to make sure all of the concerns are brought together before they even lodge, which is later in the year. So the next point there really sort of looks at the differences between the council process and the Board of Inquiry process, and really the Board of Inquiry one does give greater certainty of timing, and particularly with some large projects, infrastructure projects, where there might be funding available, the certainty of timing helps the business case, helps the process of doing some of these projects potentially faster. A council process, and even an Environment Court direct referral one, has less certainty about the timing of the decision. Yeah, so those are the key differences there. I guess the other point is that through the Board of Inquiry process, the council is much more able to be a submitter at the hearing, and in the past we have been quite active submitters to the Board of Inquiry process. So the next question is, why would it be referred to the Board of Inquiry? And there are 10 criteria there, and you've got them in the report and in your in your handout PowerPoint. So there are ones like arousing widespread public concern, and certainly the consultation has aroused quite a lot of interest in both of these areas. Involves significant use of natural and physical resources. In the case of the Northern Corridor, it's probably more about physical resources, in that we're really looking at motorway alterations, but some environmental changes as well. And the east-west corridor is similar in that there's both processes, or both resources being looked at. Affects structure, feature and place of national significance. Well, I think that in particular in the east-west area there's some areas of national significance, and
What are they?
well, I think it probably relates to the harbour itself. However, we'll get to that one, all right? Affects New Zealand's international obligations to the global environment, and that's all about, I think, using, in this case, better use of energy, and both projects, I think, have significant improvements in walking and cycling around those areas, which is a help, and also more efficient use of transport to get people and goods from one place to the next. Next one is the significant or irreversible changes to the environment, and there are changes around changing some water bodies in the north, and also around the harbour. I think some reclamation there. Involves technology, processes which are new. I don't know whether there's too many new processes there. I think both areas have significant sites in relation to our treaty obligations, and assisting the Crown to fulfil various obligations there, in particular welfare, security, safety. Certainly both of them are looking for much greater safety as transport projects. While they don't affect more than one region, we're such a big region that you probably wouldn't expect that, but certainly...
Smallest region in the country, Warren.
Well...
Hey, councillors, can we just get to the end of the presentation, and Warren
very
just...
significant.
Yep, we'll just
Right.
carry on.
Now, where was I? Relates to utility operation that extends to more than one. I guess you might say that some of these motorway type developments extend certainly to our northern neighbours as well, so it's part of that broader area. So, I think I've covered most, but a summary of the council roles within a Board of Inquiry process, because I think you're familiar with the council ones. One, we provide views now to decide whether the matters of national significance, and we may provide our views on potential members of the Board of Inquiry. We provide a written report on the key issues to consider. As I've said, it's very helpful that the council can be a submitter in its own right, and in the past we've joined together with the local board or boards so that that can happen. And finally, of course, we're the manager of the resource consents and the processor of the outline plan of works later on when the decision is made. So that's the process. Would it be helpful to talk through any questions on that, and then we'll look at each individual project, or how would you like?
I think we can just do the whole presentation, Warren. I think it's pretty full and clear. I think most people have got a reasonable knowledge about the process, and I'm sure at the end, if there are questions, we'll take them.
Okay, so the first one that I'll take you through with a couple of slides is the Northern Corridor, and you've got quite a lot of information there on it within your report, and you'll see that it's in the area basically going from Constellation, or just south of Constellation Drive, right up to the Albany Park and Ride. And the key part of it, or the several key parts of it, I think, really it's extending the busway, which is an excellent thing for the North Shore, and as well as that, it's providing a link, a more connected link from the State Highway 18, which is the Upper Harbour Highway, and going through to the north onto State Highway 1. So that gives much better connection there. And it's really it's really the last part of the whole Western Ring Route one. So it will mean being able to go from the Manukau area through adjacent to the airport, up through the Waterview Tunnel and up to the west across the Upper Harbour Bridge and along that State Highway 18 with a good connection straight on to the State Highway 1. So that's really the key for it. So you'll see that ring route shown there. So that's quite a strategic route. In the longer term, it's intended that there will also be, or this includes route protection for going from State Highway 18 southbound onto the motorway, but it's not part of this at the moment. There's also a number of cycleways and walkways. As the busway gets built, so NZTA are also looking at building a new station, so that will be good as well. So that's the overall project. And all of those that I've just talked about, yeah, some additional lanes and some roading network improvements. So there'll also be a cycleway which goes from that Constellation Drive area out along on the northern side of Upper Harbour Drive, which will join up at the Albany Highway as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions now on that one, or do we want to finish the entire east-west presentation as well?
Okay, why don't we just deal with this one? It's been moved and seconded. I think this is possibly more straightforward. Remembering that today, I think as you put in one of your slides, this is just the process discussion, not the detail. So it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Walker?
So under the Board of Inquiry process, what's the length of time we're looking at here for approvals? Roughly.
So it's from when they lodge it, 9 months.
Okay. Other question I've got is that in this area there are, I understand, a significant number of local businesses that are affected. A number of these, most of them are very well established businesses. Given the very tight availability of alternatives in the North Harbour area, is there consideration and a process that's underway to assist in relocating businesses? I mean, in some instances, business may have to be bought out as a going concern.
Oh, sorry, Councillor, you asking about how the construction time will be managed? Because I don't think we can make any reasonable comment on that. We're simply saying, let's look at the process by which the decision will be made. That's all we're being asked to do. We have none of that information available to us. More people here who can answer that question.
I think the issue that I'm raising is, we've heard that we're looking about a 9-month process. You're talking about significant and substantial businesses that are being impacted in this area. So I'm just really putting on the table that this is a very significant project affecting businesses in the area.
Yep, sure. No, I think that's well understood. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Ward?
This project's been on the books for some time now, and it's a comprehensive project that New Zealand Transport Agency have now engaged in, and I think that the fact that it is going to go to a board of inquiry will be good news for the businesses in the North Harbour area, because the businesses in the North Harbour area are screaming out for this work to happen, and it'll also mean that Councillor Webster will have a free run from the Albany bus station down the new busway. So, and also there'll be a bus station at Rosedale Road, which has been wanted for some time. So all this it's comprehensive for this project, and includes the overpass at Paul Matthews road or drive, which is also very important for the North Harbour. So
Absolutely.
9 months was far better than like we have at the busway, drawn out with environment court hearings and other things which take forever. Thank you.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Councillor Davey?
Thanks. Look, I support this process going to the Board of Inquiry like my colleague from the North Shore, but I do point out that we've got some work to do in making our submission. Currently the design alienates a lot of the North Shore, and I'm referring to the on-ramps that have a preference for north to west flows rather than west to south, and connecting them with the middle and lower North Shore. I'm delighted to see the Ministry and NZTA respond to my correspondence and that of others to push the busway out to Albany. I acknowledge Auckland Transport too for the work that they've been doing to confirm the location of the Rosedale station, and that will link in a much bigger catchment. But I think my main point is there is a lot more work for us to do between now and the Board of Inquiry. There are significant gaps in this. There are quite big implications for our land holdings and recreational facilities like North Harbour, hockey, etc. So there's a way to go on this, as there is on the next one, which we'll come to now.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Oh, now we've got everyone. We've got Councillor Crum and Councillor Watson.
Thanks. I was just going to exactly echo and repeat what Councillor Darby has just said. Again, support the Board of Inquiry process, but we do have a long way to go in the east-west connections. So would almost say word for word what you've just said, Chris. The integration of
Hang on, we're only dealing with the north one at the moment.
all right.
We're not on east-west
all right,
yet.
well,
Next one.
I've
Yep.
just said
Save
my
those
comments for
words.
it.
Cut and
Already
paste what he said for the next one. Councillor Watson?
Thank you. No, Councillor Darby makes some very, very valid points here. I would just say, however, that the Northern Corridor team have been very active in this area in terms of consultation for quite some time. They have an office that's permanently manned in the North Harbour region at any community events like tree planting and whatnot. They're out there consulting with people. Ran into a gentleman at a tree planting. He just came over from Pakuranga and was in the team. So I would just like to put on record the very thorough and accessible public consultation that they have carried out with the community, and they have, in my view anyway, gone that extra mile to meet, because notwithstanding the very valid issues that Councillor Darby brings up.
Thank you, councillors. That's why we were keen to do the presentation, so it's really clear. Board of Inquiry, council can make a submission, we can be proactive on these issues rather than simply being the regulator. So I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried, and then same issues east-west. So
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in terms of the presentation disappeared. Thank you. So in terms of the east-west link, this is a new transport link on the north side of the Mangere Inlet between State Highway 1 and at Onehunga and State Highway 20 at Onehunga and State Highway 1 at Mount Wellington. It's a key transport project that has been identified in the Auckland Plan, and the project East-West Link project team are currently undertaking public consultation at the moment, non-statutory public consultation, and that ends on the 15th of July. It is in an area of ecological significance. It includes Anne's Creek, includes other outstanding natural features such as Hamlin's Hill, Mutakuroa, and South Down lava flows. In terms of the key project objectives, this includes improving travel times and travel reliability between businesses in Onehunga and Penrose, improving safety and accessibility for cycling and walking between Mangere Bridge, Onehunga and Sylvia Park, as well as improving bus journeys between State Highway 20 and Onehunga. So in your presentation pack, you have the conceptual design that the project team is currently consulting on, and I just wanted to highlight some of the key elements, key features of the project. So this includes, just starting from west moving to east, it includes a new interchange at Nelson Street. So this will be a reconfiguration of the existing interchange to establish a connection to the new east-west link project from State Highway 20 and connecting to the surrounding local roads. Along the foreshore, there will be, what is proposed is a new 4-lane road connecting from Onehunga to Great South Road, Sylvia Park Road. In terms, moving further west, in terms of Sylvia Park Road, there will be a new southbound connection from East-West Link to State Highway 1. Moving to the east side, there will be a new bridge crossing proposed at Panama Road and a new interchange upgraded interchange at Princess Street to improve connectivity to surrounding communities east of State Highway 1. And finally, there will be improved pedestrian and cycleway connections proposed from Old Mangere Bridge through to Sylvia Park. This includes both a proposed commuter shared path as well as a recreational trail along the foreshore, as well as a number of local road improvements and connections, including improvements to Captain Springs Road, Galway Street, South Downport area and Hugo Johnson Drive. I pretty much covered that in the last slide. That just highlights what I have just gone through. So happy to take any questions, but that's just a quick overview of some of the key elements of the project. Thank you.
So before we go to questions, Simon, did you want to raise your issues? Welcome.
Kia ora te he mana ngā mihi nui, kia ora koutou ngā mima o te kaunahera o Tamaki Makaurau. Ko Simon Randall tōku ingoa te he mana o te Poware Arohe o Mangakeke Tāmaki. So I'm Simon, I'm the chair of Mangakeke Tāmaki Local Board. Tēnei te wiki o te reo Māori. So embracing your direction, Madam Chair. Just in terms of the questions before you, to consider the specific item on today's agenda, the first question is this regionally significant, the east-west connections? I don't think the government would be spending $1.4 to $1.8 billion on something that wasn't regionally significant. So our board absolutely agrees that it is a regionally significant, a nationally significant project, and so agree with that. In terms of the questions about the way that this question should be considered in terms of the consenting process, our board hasn't been asked for its formal views, and so I'm not going to be able to definitely say exactly what we think of this question, but I'm using our local plan and informal conversations that we've had with officers to inform this. Some principles. The first is that this is a huge project which will have impacts in our community of significance. Hopefully they will be significantly good. But the first principle I would say is that the community needs to be involved and strongly listened to. There has been a lot of engagement going forward, and that continues through this informal engagement phase at the moment. And certainly we've worked closely with NZTA to ensure that that occurs. We think that referral straight to the Environment Court would exclude our community and would strongly urge against that as an option, because it would mean that community would have to employ lawyers and go through what is quite an adversarial and difficult process for our community to navigate. And so that leaves two processes, which is the Board of Inquiry one or a straight notice of requirement resource consent program. In terms of between those issues, as I said, we haven't discussed this as a board formally, but if we could get the right community consultation and involvement, we'd probably lean to a Board of Inquiry, because that means that council could be a strong submitter and incorporate the views of the local board in their submissions, as officers have been working with us to do so. And ensure that the key issues and the key matters, of which there are many, are well considered. We also think a Board of Inquiry process can take sort of a wider view, as has been demonstrated, and that's certainly what's required in such a big project. So informally, probably lean to a Board of Inquiry for those reasons. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Really appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you, Simon. So, Councillor Crum.
I'll just repeat what I said earlier, and also note, because I think it is worth noting how well both reports read, and it's sort of a frequently asked questions almost format, so I haven't seen that format in a while, and I thought they were both very well written. Thanks.
Good feedback, thank you. Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just with the east-west link, a real bone of contention with the commuting public and the heavy transport public is on State Highway 1, the Mount Wellington flyover. There's no specific works mentioned there. Is there any talk about works being done for that flyover on State Highway 1, where this junction does head south and the other alternative route goes north further up? But that is a major choke point on our transport network. So has that been looked at to be included in this type of scope?
I believe so. There is a southbound connection from Sylvia Park Road through to State Highway 1. I'm not sure if that's the area that you're talking about, but
It's the north, it's the bridge there that's 2 lanes each side with 3 lanes going out of it and 3 lanes going out on the other side. It's a choke point. So it's whether there's any work been done to investigate that State Highway 1 overbridge choke point.
I guess that's exactly
Not
what will
really.
come
I don't-
out through this
Yeah.
whole process, councillor, so we can't dig down into the details at this point. This is simply, is this the process we're endorsing or not? Councillor Wood and then
Just-
Councillor Darby.
Well, just in relation to this project, it obviously impacts on various communities, distinct communities. There's the area around Great South Road at Southdown, and then there's obviously the areas through along the Manukau foreshore, and then the areas around Onehunga. So what processes will the council go through to get the views of those areas, the people of those areas, so that that can be integrated into the council submission?
as part of the process, once the application is lodged with the Board of Inquiry, as we had indicated before, Council will make a submission. As part of that submission, it will also incorporate local board views. But as part of the process, any member of the community can make a submission as part of the Board of Inquiry process. So if they want to raise any concerns or issues, they can make a submission formally through to the Board of Inquiry process, and it's quite similar to our council hearing process when we're considering a notice of requirement or resource consent.
So Councillor Wood, are you wanting to know a little bit about how do we physically get that information out there so that people are able to participate?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the public have really got to, well, the people have we've got to really know that, well, be certain that we understand the views of the community when we're putting our submission together, because, as I said, they're diverse communities of different interests. One is a business area and one is a business residential area, and it's becoming more of a residential area around Onehunga. So that's the kind of question I want to know, and to make some certainty that the council will be interfacing with the community and getting their views known before we dive off making our submission. And obviously linking in with the local board as well. Okay, thank you.
I suppose in terms of that point, once we prepare a council submission, I think as a council family, we will work up a framework for how council, the organisation, will work together in collecting views across the organisation, which I understand would encompass views of the local community.
Thank you.
I'm just talking to Dean, and this is probably in partnership with the local board. I would not presume that our submission would endeavour to incorporate all the views of the local community. I think it's twofold. We're both a technical submitter and raising the wider technical issues, as well as acting as an advocate for getting the opportunity for inputting out to our community. I just don't think we would presume to speak for that whole community. So I think we need to be proactive with our local board and making sure that the community is enabled and well informed and encouraged to participate. But I think we'd fall into a real trap trying to do it for them. Councillor Darby.
Chair, I think I might speak to it once it's moved, and I'll speak after Councillor Crum if she is going to speak to it, because she's elected councillor.
I'm presuming that we are kind of doing that already. So Councillor Crum, you happy to move?
I'll second it.
And seconded, okay. So it's been moved and seconded. Are you happy to talk now, Councillor Darby? Questions?
Yep, okay.
Oh. Okay, sorry, you hadn't signalled,
I did.
Councillor. Let's just tie-ho any debate for a moment. Why don't we just take Councillor Casey with questions?
In the report it says that only one local board was consulted and that the Mangere o Tahuhu local board wasn't asked for its views. Can you say why?
Sorry, the project covers 2 local boards, you're correct. In terms of, there was paragraph 39, we had indicated council staff will update local boards. We had, at the time of writing the report, scheduled a meeting for the 28th of June, so that was a week ago with Mangakeki Tamaki, and we have another briefing with Mangere o Tahuhu local board tomorrow in terms of going through our understanding of the project and technical issues that we've raised to date. I hope that clarifies.
So why was the Mangere Tahuhu board not consulted? That was my question.
They changed the rules.
Pardon? Sorry.
Why weren't they consulted?
As part of...
That was my question. There are 2 boards. One's here and been consulted and the other hasn't. My question was why not? NZTA, the project team, has actually gone to brief both local boards on the project in recent times. Council officers have briefed the Mangakeki Tamaki local board recently and will be going to the Mangere o Tahuhu local board. Yeah, so why has there been no feedback from the Mangere o Tahuhu local board here today alongside the feedback from the other local board? That's my question.
I can't answer that question.
Do you have
Can't answer?
Chair, with the east-west link, it was actually looking at coming through the Mangere o Tahuhu local board. So this whole project started a few years ago in regards to the consultative process. Now as you can see with the east-west link, it's actually coming through. All the cycling and everything else, we've been consulted in regard to that with the new bridge replacing the old one, if you understand what I'm saying. So all the cycling and pedestrian stuff we're getting consulted about, but it's now changed the actual coming through along the Mangakeki Tamaki side. So for us, everything's now changed. It's not actually coming through. There was a few issues 3 years ago. I know that much. There were some issues around it coming through, cutting through properties in Mangere. That's no longer the case now.
Well, it's still, through the chair, have been good to have a report from the board in that respect. My other question is about the contentious issue of rail to the airport. And I mean, I've now been in 2 forums where I've heard different views from NZTA and council officers. Can you explain, please, one of the public concerns in paragraph 13 on our page 87 about the opportunities for achieving future rail connections to the airport? That's one of the public's concerns and one of mine too.
We have been advised by the NZTA project team on East-West Link that the East-West Link project will not preclude a rail corridor.
That's what we heard from them directly, and that's been challenged.
Okay, that's the information we're operating under.
Yep.
Okay. Finished, Councillor Casey? Yep. Okay.
I
Right.
suppose just
Any
my
more?
my other comment was that paragraph 13 is quite a condensed view of all the issues that are of concern to the public. It would have been quite good to have each of those issues have a paragraph in itself. So I was going to ask you just to go through them maybe and say a bit more about the concerns, because these are the issues that will come up during whatever inquiry is going to be had.
Through the Madam Chair, do you want...
I'm just a little, I can understand the question. I just think that the process, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. The process here is, are we agreeing with a board of inquiry? And that then gives us the opportunity to raise, digest and expand on all of these issues. I think it's presumptive to, or kind of presuming that we have the answers. We need to raise the questions and the concerns, get that out to our community, take it far and wide, work with our local boards to do that. I think it's a little bit premature, Councillor Casey.
Well, it would be true today that we're signing off a road.
No,
it will happen.
No, Councillor,
it will
that's
happen the way
why.
it's been determined in the maps here.
I need to be. Sorry, you're quite incorrect, and I'm not going to have incorrect information perpetuated in this chamber. The reality is this is a board of inquiry that is being initiated, and we're in no way being seen to sign this off. And I think if we were, there would certainly be some dissenting voices around the council chamber, of which one would be mine. So, let's be very clear about the process here, and let's be very clear that the council submission, I would imagine, would be pretty searching and hard-hitting as needed. So I do not agree that we're signing off this road today. Am I correct?
Correct.
I thought the route was as stated in the map here, isn't it?
This is the, what's currently on consultation is the map shown in the presentation. What will go to the Board of Inquiry if the Minister for Environment decides the Board of Inquiry process is the way they wish to go, will be applications for notices of requirement to designate a route and accompanying resource consents for the construction of the project.
Yeah, this route.
But the Board of Inquiry could still say no.
Or change it.
So, let's be very clear about that. We have the media here and we have the community observing, and we are constantly being portrayed as making decisions that we have never made nor are making. And, today we're deciding on whether to support a Board of Inquiry. Let's be very clear about that.
Well,
Next
sorry,
question.
just to prolong this, but at water view, the route was decided by the council first, then it went to the Board of Inquiry, and I'm assuming that's the same here. We've got the route and it's going to the Board of Inquiry for its kind of working through.
This is a water view.
But perhaps I could just comment on where that all fits. What's happening is that, as the Deputy Mayor says, we're asking simply about a process at the moment, but consultation is still going on, and we won't know the exact route and the exact area of the designation, for instance, until they lodge. And they lodge in terms of the Northern Corridor, I think it's late October, November, and in the case of the East-West link, it's more likely to be December. So then that will be publicly notified for submission probably it'll be in the first quarter of next year. So it's not until, and presumably NZTA are taking into account the comments that they're getting at the moment and bringing those into whatever their preferred route is that becomes the one that they lodge. But they've lodged nothing at the moment. You see what I mean?
But we've had a presentation on this route.
So these are routes which are likely and are being consulted on before they finalise them.
So I suppose we're presenting a report on the process in terms of how the project will be assessed and the decision maker. So whether it's council or the requiring authority or the Board of Inquiry or the Environment Court. So that's what's been asked today in terms of the report presented before you.
Okay, so I just want to be clear whether people wish to speak to the recommendation or ask questions. So I've got still got Councillor Crum and Darby, but I think you might, yes, I've got you, Councillor Lee. I've got Councillor Lee and Quacks. I've got you both. I just need to know, are you asking questions or are you speaking to the recommendation?
A question.
Then go.
Madam Chair, I wonder if it's an oversight, but I would have thought that the delegation would have included, or the chair of the infrastructure committee in B. And I'm surprised to note that Councillor Lee is not on that list, and I think he should be.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
I wonder if we could have him added to that list.
I think that's absolutely fine. In fact, I think, can we talk about the local board? Yeah. And we'd also talked, sorry, I thought some changes had been made. I know we also raised the local board, the local board chair, and just as part of that. So I'm sorry, that might have been a little bit slow. Yeah, so we'll add in the local board chair to that list. So was that your only question, Councillor Quacks?
So we've added the local board chair, Simon Randall, and the chair of the infrastructure committee, Councillor Lee. Is that correct?
Well, that's what they're doing. Councillor Lee.
Ngā mihi mahana o te rā. Madam Chair, members, this really is at this stage a matter of process. And I'm concerned that one, we're getting ahead of the process, and two, getting into a situation where we, without careful consideration, are shortchanging our own responsibilities and our responsibilities to the community. This is a call-in procedure that the government put into the Resource Management Act in 2009 to fast-track big projects. And you can understand why, given their political objectives and philosophy, and their constant concerns with the Resource Management Act that incidentally that government passed, or a previous national government passed in 1991 when it was about that thin, and keep on amending it till it's about that thick. But however, basically is this, we are being asked to go along with a fast track process, not the standard Resource Management Act process. Now, is this legally and logically appropriate, is the question we should be asking. Is this a matter of national urgency? And there are 10 criteria in the Act which the Minister, before calling in, has to address. And if I may, Madam Chair, go through these points, I'd have to question Mr. McClellan's interpretation of those points. Arouse widespread public concern or interest. What I'm picking up at this stage is a lot of people are bemused and puzzled about the East-West link. So rather than widespread public concern or interest, there seems to be, apart from a lack of knowledge, not a high amount of public engagement. And at this stage, at least, it is not a controversial topic in terms of widespread public concern. So I have a question mark over that one. Involves significant use of natural and physical resources. Well, 1.8 billion, that's a lot of resources, I guess, but compared to other projects, maybe not. But the other thing that's a bit of a worry is the 1.2 to 1.8, which is like a $500 million wobbly bit that we're not sure of. Then we've got, to really adequately answer that question, it affects a structure, feature, place or area of national significance. Well, the foreshore along Pikes Point has never been considered of national significance in terms of what really is of national significance in terms of legal national parks and features like that. So that's a question mark as well. Affects New Zealand's international obligations to the global environment. With all due respect, Madam Chair, Kiwis walking and cycling probably is not going to have a huge impact on the global environment, and actually you can walk and cycle along there right now. So I would say that's a negative thought. Results in significant or irreversible changes to the environment, including the global environment. I don't know about the global environment, Madam Chair. This was the former Pikes Point area. Technology processes that are new, I don't think so. Is significant in terms of the Treaty of Waitangi? Well, probably it is. Most things are, so we could say that's a yes. Will assist the Crown in fulfilling its public health, welfare, security or safety obligations. This is serious stuff, members. That means something. Does this really? I don't think so. Affects one region or district, more than one region or district? No. With all due respect, going from Onehunga to Penrose is not really going very far at all. It relates to a network utility and so on. Madam Chair, I question that, and even the chair of the local board, with all due respect, seemed to be confused about what was locally important, regionally important and nationally important, and I guess he, in the end, he ticked all of the above boxes, but of course you would, wouldn't you, if you represent that area. But what I didn't hear from him was the views of his board and the views of the Onehunga Penrose community about this and whether they want a fast track. Now, it was pointed out that the applicant, NZTA, could go straight to the Environment Court, and that is considered to be a dire prospect. Now, the only case that I'm familiar with that happening were the proposers of the Matiatia Marina at Waiheke Island, and they believe they could shut out the community or fast track their project by going directly to the Environment Court, and lo and behold, the Environment Court went out of its way to have the most open, user-friendly, inclusive, positive process that you could have had, and actually it worked out quite well, and I believe the community got the result they wanted anyway. So going directly to the Environment Court is not necessarily a dire prospect for the community. I believe that the case has not been made, especially at this point when we don't even know the actual route yet, to go along with the fast track process. So at this stage, Madam Chair, without directly contradicting everything the officer has said, there are severe questions raised here, and I don't think the case has been made for us to go along with a fast track at this point in time. Thank you.
So what are you proposing, councillor? What's the alternative? What are you proposing then?
Until, Madam Chair, I'm not proposing anything at this stage. I'm proposing that we do not go along with the recommendations at this point until at least we've seen where the actual designations are, and we get some assurance also, if you're asking, that the East-West Link project will not disrupt or the Onehunga rail network and the corridor to Auckland International Airport, because as the Mayor has pointed out, whatever the board of NZTA or AT have said, they are not the final authority on this one. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so that wasn't a question. I think what we might do is take that as one of the speakers to the recommendation. I just want to check, are there any other questions before we go?
I've still got a question about, and I just want to know this. With the Northern Corridor upgrade at Rosedale at Constellation, New Zealand Transport Agency have put out a consultation document to the community once they kind of got some ideas and drew up what they were going to do. Has that happened with this this idea? Because the first thing that I saw was what their proposal was, but I haven't seen, and I know that they did consultation, but that consultation was pretty wide-ranging, and I remember going and meeting Councillor Crum at a consultation that New Zealand Transport Agency had at Onehunga. But since they've settled on and landed on this one route, have they then gone to the communities and got some feedback in relation to what the community's views are on this one route?
Yeah, there's one this afternoon from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock, and that's one of 5 that are coming up.
So it's happening.
And Chairman Randall and I have sat in no less than at least 5 community stakeholder consultation forums of one form or another. There's been a lot of consultation.
They haven't analysed their returns yet for that work.
Well, yes, they have, which is why we've got the preferred route before we get the preferred route.
So before we get back down that foxhole of debating the merits and the details, the discussion today is about the process, and we just need to be clear on that. So, Councillor Crum, did you wish to speak to the recommendation? Sorry.
I think I just said the comments right then that I wanted to say, which was really in answer to some of what Councillor Lee has just said, is querying whether this is should be fast-tracked. I think is extraordinary, given how non-fast-tracked freight is gridlocked sitting there on Nelson Street, and the extraordinary contribution to this country's GDP represented in this this area, well, it's just nothing short of extraordinary. And so we do need to get some progress here, and there is very much the wide consensus I'm picking up for a Board of Inquiry process, and there has been significant community consultation, as I just previously outlined.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Crum. Councillor Darby, speaking to the recommendation.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Councillor Crum's right. It's a real life truckers road. This one. This is all about freight, and I'll come to that. But look, it's also in our Auckland plan. So we're in a difficult situation here because Council has actually identified this as one of 3 big transport projects, along with the CRL, well tracked on that, and the additional harbour crossing.
It's rail to the airport.
Well, I think it's actually 3 that are actually in the Auckland plan, in that category. But and Councillor Lee is correct that it's not a road of national significance, so get those words out of it. It's in the accelerated package, and the government are deeming it a significant project within that package. But, you know, like the CRL, and I say this after we had our workshop a couple of weeks ago, I expect NZTA and all those involved in Wellington to put this project through a very well-torsioned ringer that the CRL went through many times. It was wrung dry at the end to prove itself. We are well short of this even getting sight of the ringer at the moment. This has not come anywhere near the place of building up a business case that supports a 1.2 to 1.8, let's just average it $1.5 billion of public money. And one could say, well, that's not our money, that's central government money. There is our money in there as well, because this has implications for the local road network, and we are required to marry all the local road network in. So we should be keeping a very close eye on this between now and the Board of Inquiry, and I know AT are doing that, and so too is Panuku Development Auckland. So it started out as a $550 million project with a 1.4 to 1.9 BC, benefit cost ratio. It's showing up now as a 1.5, and according to NZTA, it's still got the same BC. Magic. Now, imagine if we had have suggested that on the CRL, if we had have taken inflated numbers and just said, oh, and by the way, Minister, we're doing great, we've still got the same BC. I'm sure the Minister would be saying to us, can you show us your workings for that BC? And of course, we'd be caught out. There are no workings for that updated BC of 1.5 to 1.9. I think they are the numbers. So at the moment, the NZTA actually don't know the benefits and the likely costs that will be delivered by this project. I don't think we should just jump to the conclusion that we've got a very busy road, lots of trucks on it, we need to do something about them. The next item that's on our agenda actually has implications for that business case. It certainly does. And now, while the Metro Port is serving the Port of Tauranga, you can't decouple the Metro Port and the Port of Tauranga's interests from where a future port, megaport, if it's that, might be. Some parts of my reading of this may be a little bit cynical, but this is in some ways, a private road to the Metro Port and from the Metro Port. So I think we need to get our heads around a lot of that, and I'm signalling now, Madam Chair, for the dense work that we have to do to make our submission on the Board of Inquiry. Has huge implications for our Panuku Development Auckland work in our transform category. This is where we want to work the most in Onehunga and Manukau. So this project risks severing Onehunga and Onehunga Wharf, the very thing that we're trying to bind together. So lots of work there to do as well. I'm also aware that there's no urban design analysis, no landscape analysis. We have got a linear line on a map creating a road along a foreshore, the very thing that livable cities that we aspire to be or compete with around the world are ripping out. They're not putting in place, they are ripping roads like that out that go along foreshores. We will, in time, discover the Manukau foreshore. Maybe not there at the moment, but part of it, the Onehunga side, we certainly have. So I'm not convinced that we're anywhere near the detail, but it does need to go to a Board of Inquiry, but we're going to have to do a lot of work on our side before we get there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. I've got one more speaker, and then I think we'll move to the recommendation. Councillor Penrose.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And I sit around this table for the last 5.5 years, sometimes quite bewildered, actually, when I see the lost productivity across Auckland, sitting at 1.2 billion 12 months ago, now sitting around about 2.2 billion and climbing. And just yesterday, again, I heard another trucking company that's gone from 5 truck movements a day down to 3. So that staff getting laid off, that's lost productivity again just for one company alone, let alone everything else that goes on. Last September, Councillor Fletcher and myself moved the Mill Road corridor to be a road of national significance / state highway to fast track the process. And, you know, I'd be screaming for that to happen. I take a wee bit of a contrary view to Councillor Lee because I see daily the southern motorway gridlocked and the Mill Road corridor will be welcomed to get moving and get the city on the right track. Whether it's a road of national significance, whether it's a national highway, state highway, whether it's fast-tracking the process, the Board of Inquiry, I don't care what it is. If it takes the government to step in and get the money behind it and to make things happen, I welcome it to get things moving, Madam Chair. So I'll be supporting these recommendations to get things moving in this region. That's what I'm here for.
Madam Chair, sorry, I'm just wondering, we have quite a few people on that B. Should we have the local councillor?
Sorry, Councillor, this is just what we're talking about. We're just trying to work out the...
Cast of thousands.
We're kind of work well with casts of thousands. We just have raised the issue of Transport Director and Chair of the Infrastructure Committee being the same person. Not sure if that is could be a perceived conflict. It may be an issue. No, well, Councillor, it's my job as Chair to make sure that these issues are raised. It's the individual's decision then whether they act on that or not. That's all I'm saying. I'm not making the call. Please don't dismiss the issue that I raise. Sorry, Councillor Webster.
I just wondered if the local councillor would like to be on there as well as the chair of the local board.
I'm just amused by the situation. We've gone from 5 to 7 and now possibly 8 to look at potential Board of Inquiry members. So yes, add me on. Rather amusing situation.
Yep. Why not? I
Let's
see
put the
no
mayor
problem
there
with
as
that.
well. Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Where's the mayor?
I just, we've got A and B that have been moved and seconded. We've got the names added in or being worked on as we speak. I'll put that. All those in favour.
By division.
Right.
By division. Okay.
Councillor Anai.
Aye.
Councillor Brewer.
For.
Councillor Casey.
No.
Councillor Cashmore.
Yes.
Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Philippina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yes.
Councillor Crum.
For.
Councillor Lee.
No.
Member Namani.
Aye.
Councillor Penrose.
Yes.
Councillor Quacks.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Member Taipari.
Aye.
Councillor John Walker.
Yes.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
No.
Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Webster.
Yes.
Councillor Wood.
Yes.
Mayor House.
Aye. That's carried.
Carried by
Okay.
17
Right.
What's that say about us?
We will carry on. Thank you, team. Lots of work to be done on this. So we move now to item 15, which is the proposed national policy statement on urban development capacity. Welcome, Reagan and Megan and Jacques. So I know this was, we had the workshop on this, ably chaired by Councillor Darby, amongst other issues that were dealt with, so people have had a chance to input into this. We've had the submission for some time, haven't had any other feedback on it, so this is our chance to just make sure that everyone's clear on what's in there. So should we just take it as read and have questions? You happy to move? Member Taipari, seconded. Councillor Penrose. Any questions? Councillor Cashmore.
Just someone, team, refresh us on any gaps that the national policy statement on this topic, on the urban development capacity, where we have gaps compared to what this is designing, what we actually have done or are doing.
The gaps probably relate to the things that we'll have to do as a result of this, like thinking 30 years and doing feasibility work. We're in a very good position in relation to information sources and stuff like that, but it's probably about how they're asking us to stretch our thinking in this process.
And the monitoring and the measuring of what we're actually delivering?
So that's all being debated at the moment with MFE and MB about exactly what we should be doing, and we've made some suggestions this Monday, just been at a workshop about different things that should or shouldn't be counted. That's all a work in progress.
Thank you.
And Tam's just reminded me, sorry, just to draw people's attention to, we've got tabled feedback from the Waiheke Local Board and from the, I think the FO, yeah? Oh, and Oraki. Okay, Councillor Quacks.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of small things, but I note that there's I just picked up on a typo on top of page 148. Further work may be required on the effect of this NPS on Maori. Should read owned land, should it not, rather than owned land? Just a small thing.
Thank you. Well done.
I wonder if the chief economist has had any input into this submission, given the fact that he's written quite extensively on supply capacity and housing affordability, infrastructure, funding and so forth. Has the chief economist had any input into this submission?
Yep, we've discussed the national policy statement with him, and him and his team have given us some feedback about different points. Yep.
So he's had an input into it.
Yep.
Yeah, good.
Councillor Fletcher.
I just wonder whether the officers could actually give us some commentary on the submissions that we have from the Aoraki Local Board and the Waiheke Local Board, please.
Very good.
So I'm not too sure when these were received and if the staff have even had a chance to have
Sure.
a look.
Many of the issues that have been raised by all the local boards are pretty consistent. So Aoraki has got made points about definitions of infrastructure, and we've included those things into the submission. And we've made the points in this draft submission about needing to ensure that the urban areas are part of the mix, that funding and infrastructure is part of that process. So I think we've covered those pretty well. And similar, there's some issues raised by Waiheke. I think we've covered them.
Could I perhaps just add to that? Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. Waiheke Local Board also makes some statements about the uniqueness of the islands, obviously, in relation to perhaps the other more urban parts of Auckland, and that's clearly reflected in both our in both the Auckland plan, but also our other plans, like our district plans and things. They are treated differently. They're not a growth area in the sense of growth. So that's also covered.
It's captured. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Sure. Just have a question or two around the evidence and monitoring. On page 157, it mentions in Council's submission the need to differentiate between existing owners, in brackets investors, and non-owners. I'd suggest and put a question that's rather limited, given the nature of what appears to be happening in the marketplace. Have we considered submitting to government that we need more information around overseas investment, around the number of ghost houses that are quite significant in parts of Auckland and are quite obviously impacting on supply, on the aspect that much of the demand is global demand, not just local demand, and houses and properties in Auckland are being promoted and advertised globally, and obviously in terms of the demand and supply equation, that's a difficult one for us to deal with. And differentiation as it goes to owner-occupiers. And all of these things we know go to meeting the needs of Aucklanders, people in New Zealand that want to live in houses in Auckland and own those houses.
So that comment there is about the owners and investors is there to suggest that there is a lot of diversity in housing. People experience it in lots of different ways, and so when you're monitoring, we want to make sure that we take a really diverse view about the types of people, the kinds of experiences, not just focused on the kind of price signal stuff, although that is absolutely very important. It's not to the exclusion of other things. So that's why that's in there. The monitoring stuff is still being debated about whether or not it should be this specific. So you have to monitor these kinds of things, and we're working with the government or the MB officials at the moment on that, and we've raised those points about vacancies of residential rates or whatever. I guess one of the points to make would be that we can do more than what is said here if we want to, and it doesn't stop us from doing more than what's legislatively required.
Just to have a question around that. So is it to our advantage to do that if the government is not going to monitor those things, and we think that those things are very real things impacting on the marketplace and maybe things that the government should know?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's no harm in collecting more information which tells a better, more evidence-informed story.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you for including in your points the very salient one about decision makers. We've all heard from the government statements from time to time criticising the council for being slow on approving land, developments and so on for housing, which is not fair because we all know the council has done as much as it possibly can to go along with what the government wants. However, that hasn't spared the council from a kicking every now and then. So decision maker is important because all through the proposed policy statement there is reference to regional councils and district councils, followed by the word must. But every now and then the word decision maker by logical necessity comes in, and when it comes to functions under the Act, ministers are very much involved as decision makers, not just critics. And so this binds them. And this is important because this is not just about houses, because there is a connection between houses and Councillor Penrose being stuck on the motorway. There is no point in having extra houses if there's not adequate infrastructure. And the Crown, in terms of building motorways, has not kept up with the councils and its predecessors, including the ARC releasing land for housing. So this binds the ministers as well. They're in it as well. The point that also needs to be made is that this should not be seen, or cannot be seen legally, as a standalone encyclical from the government. It is a policy statement under the Resource Management Act and must comply with Section 5 of RMA. In terms, the word sustainability appears absolutely, or sustainable management appears absolutely nowhere in the policy statement, which may create legal difficulties, especially in terms of putting it into practice, taking into account the other policy statements released from the government. One in particular that I think is germane is the National Policy Statement on Freshwater Management, which talks a lot about a council's obligation to safeguard the life-supporting capacity of fresh water. And we do have a problem already with overflowing sewage pump stations, which is certainly not helping the life-supporting capacity of fresh water. So that is a problem that I think that should be raised, the coherence of this policy statement in the scheme of the Act and as it relates to other policy statements, because it seems to stand alone. There's no reference we are a maritime city, 2 harbours or 3, no reference at all to the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement and our obligations under that, including the government's obligations, nor indeed the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park Act, especially Part 1. So my concern is this may have unintended consequences for the authors, but well, good luck to them. But I think it's important that we advocate that this policy statement needs to be coherent in terms of the scheme of the Act and the other policy statements, which are, some of them are very recent. Thank you.
Do you want to comment? Nicole? Yeah. Okay. Right. Councillor Wood?
Yeah, thank you. In relation to water care, have we seen their submission? And how, if we have, how does it relate to our submission?
So at the moment, no, we haven't. We have had a discussion with a couple of people from Watercare about that, and I think they've got a particular. We've said that from our perspective, the water comes from down south. So we're in this mix of having to work constructively with other territorial authorities. So we've made that point. They've got some more specific points about issues of funding and access to the water.
Okay, well, just in relation to some of the local boards, they made submissions or comments in relation to wastewater treatment. So how has that been telegraphed to Watercare? I just find it a bit strange that we've got 2 submissions going in from Auckland Council, and we haven't seen what the Watercare one is at this stage.
And that's been raised quite strongly with them, and I think the discussion is being had at a really senior level, Councillor Wood.
Oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
it makes me a bit
Wouldn't
curious.
it be good if we could all act as a collective on this? Councillor Casey?
Yeah, thank you for cascading the 4 well-beings from the objectives into the policy, but I wondered if we could do a bit more than that. We spent a lot of time in the workshop on the absence of people and the absence of social. It seems to me the government only ticks the economic box and doesn't look at all about environment, social and cultural. And we've got lots and lots and lots of stuff we can give them to help them with their definitions. So not just, not just the cascading, but actually telling them what we mean by the well-beings.
So you'd like that put in there, Councillor Casey, the
just
for well-being?
Because it matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we may have exhausted the questions. Councillor Cashmore?
Just with the Watercare issue, Madam Chair, it has been raised by several people.
Yep.
Should we have a C that we recommend to Watercare that they move their submission in with ours in some form? Or has that been handled by our ELT?
No, you should absolutely move that.
Yeah, I agree with
I
that.
think that's a wise thing to do.
It's been
Part of a
raised.
continuing discussion.
And it certainly fleshes out the slightly tricky discussion that we're having at the moment, where Watercare insists that they are acting in a completely joined up fashion, and we're saying, not so much.
Part of the family.
This
So
is
perhaps
a
we should
good-
have a C that we recommend that Watercare's, oh, they've got it there. It's been
Merged with
merged
council.
there.
Yep.
It's fine.
Marvellous. Happy mover
Yes,
and
Madam Chair.
seconder?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. I'll just recommend that we take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back at, let's come back at 11:20.
You gotta say it all.
It's more than 5 minutes. Number 16 is the port study, and I'd like to welcome Rick and Jacques and Toby. Warm welcome, and hand, I think, straight over to Jacques. Thanks, Jacques.
Good morning, councillors. A year ago, the Auckland Development Committee initiated an independent process to look at the long...
I just need to pull that a bit closer, Jacques. It's a bit quiet.
Our wires are a bit stuck. So a year ago, this committee initiated a process to look at the long-term future of the port. The way that that process was set up was for Aucklanders to have a conversation about the port. And once they've had that conversation, to recommend back to the council the best way forward in the long term. And I think there are two things that are important to note about the process that we've just been through. There was no political involvement in the process. That was a decision made by this committee. And also, council did not decide who the people are or should be that should have this conversation. The people that had the conversation chose themselves from amongst themselves. So it was not something set up by the council. The purpose of the study was to look at the long-term needs of Auckland in terms of freight and in terms of the cruise industry. So it was not to look at the short-term issues, it was not to address immediate constraints or issues that we have, it was focused on the long term. So that was the purpose of the study. There are other processes that deal with the short-term issues. This was not it. Just to note that the study was delivered on time and under budget. And what we are doing today, we are bringing to you the recommendations of the consensus working group. So first time you see this, we are not asking committee to make any decisions because this is the first time that you see it. We are simply asking you to receive those recommendations. With me is Dr. Rick Boven. So Rick was appointed as the independent chair to lead the study. And on this side of me is Toby Shepherd. Toby was the council staff member that supported the whole process throughout. I'm going to hand over to Rick. There has been quite a bit of media over the last week or so. Some of that media started even before the recommendations were finalised. Most of the commentary in the media has been very accurate, and that has been really good. Some of it probably not very factual. So on that note, I will hand over to Rick, who will take us through the work that the CWG has done and also talk about the recommendations that they are making.
Thank you. Warm welcome, Rick, and it would be good to set the record straight on some issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, councillors. My role has been to chair the consensus working group and the reference group, and effectively to be a facilitator here. I've been guiding the process, developing shared understanding, developing consensus, contributing to communicating the consensus working group conclusions, and communicating with the media and with others about the project. In that role, I've been very well supported by the CWG and by the council with input from the reference group and from EY, the consultants. The project was set up with many different interests represented. They were often opposing one another, and there was some history of contention. And there were very different positions and solutions offered by CWG members at the beginning. But a common interest in the long-term future success of Auckland, which was very important. We never had nor discussed a vote, and we progressed generally by assent. Before going further though, I've agreed to advise you that after the consensus position presented in the CWG report was developed, and the CWG report was completed, I've received communication from Karen Wilson, who's a mana whenua rep on the CWG representing Te Akatai Wauhua. Karen's position is that the EY report and the CWG report is not taken into consideration mana whenua values, principles and other matters that are crucial, including the ownership of the Waitemata and the Manukau harbours, co-governance arrangements and the impact of impending settlement claims. She's expressed concerns about the use of the MCA methodology to address cultural matters or to assess cultural matters, and observed that there was insufficient consideration of cultural impacts until later in the study, and the impact was not sufficiently discussed, and that concerns expressed were not sufficiently acknowledged or responded to. I note that I've not received any indications of similar concerns by other mana whenua representatives. There were several layers of process included to understand mana whenua perspectives and views, and that the Port Future Study design did not allow for consultation processes. Consequently, Karen has asked me to advise you that she withdraws her support from the recommendations. So on to the Port Future Study. It was designed by the Council, a long-term future, more than 50 years, and that means there are fundamental uncertainties to be addressed. The challenge was to consider the location of the port with a range of options: expand on the site, constrain it, move some of the trades, relocate, etc. And the project design established the structures and the timing and the resources. It wasn't a short-term study, but if you want to get to the long-term, that means that you need to consider the short-term implications of the long-term strategy. So we had some consideration of short-term. The study was effectively conducted by the Consensus Working Group. It governed the study. They built shared understanding of the issues and the evidence, established the objectives and the scope, appointed the consultants, worked with the consultants, and developed conclusions, recommendations and communication. And the CWG was required to operate independently, and it has been able to do so. This wasn't an easy issue. It would have been solved already. We've had constrained time, resources, but in my opinion these have been sufficient, and we've had a well-constituted and effective Consensus Working Group. The consultant consortium, led by EY, has worked hard and collaboratively on what has been a challenging project for us all. And the report contains evidence, conclusions and recommendations, and will be an important source of information about the port strategy. The story isn't simple, but it's laid out in our report, and I will try and summarise it briefly and then take some questions. New Zealand's and Auckland's prosperity depends on trade and is expected to grow to 2.5 million people in around 50 years. That's the city. And that means there is a series of issues to resolve. The first one of those is, can growth be accommodated at the current site? The projections of this study are relatively consistent with previous studies. It means that we're probably okay for a few decades, but at some point we may need to move. Well, there's great uncertainty. There are estimation differences. We're dealing with fast growth, long time horizons. New Zealand potentially a very attractive place to be, an increasingly attractive place in an increasingly constrained and unstable world, and perhaps becoming a big value-added exporter. There are also possible future technologies, meaning that we could handle growth at the current site. There's potential for dematerialisation of the economy, global disruption, 3D printing, etc., that might reduce the demand for capacity. So in response to all of that, we've made our first recommendation, which is that we should create an alternative port location option. If we need an option but we don't have one, then that would be very expensive in the future. If we create an option, that will imply costs and difficulties in the short term, but then we're ready and prepared for the long term. Second issue is, where should that option be? Before doing that, I have to explain 4 things. First of all, the consultant has advised us that in the long term, neither Port of Tauranga nor Northport have capacity potential to accommodate their own volume growth and Auckland's growth too. Secondly, in the long term, internal freight costs are very important. You don't want a port that is a long way away, and distance matters when choosing even among local options. Third, there are big fixed costs of establishing a new port, and to justify those fixed costs, we need to hold the port's volumes and business together and ensure the port's viability. And finally, the exception to that is that we've concluded that cruise should stay close to the CBD. The design had a long list and a short list in our report, and the consultants' reports provide a sort of a bit of a blow-by-blow as to how the options were created and narrowed down. But essentially, the consultants concluded and recommended that Manukau Harbour is the preferred location based on a combination of the package of social, environmental and cultural. It's closer to existing future and industrial locations and to transport connections. It's preferred over other options, including expansion at the current location on the economic cost-benefit analysis. However, From the consultant's advice and peer review, we cannot be sure that the geological, hydrological attributes and future weather conditions are acceptable until further, more technical work is done. The CWG members most closely associated with the shipping industry caution us about adverse consequences of a West Coast location, and there are treaty negotiations in progress, iwi interests in the Manukau, environmental concerns, and many other obstacles that would need to be overcome before a Manukau option could be endorsed. The Firth of Thames options have less challenging shipping issues, higher capital and operating costs, cultural, environmental and regulatory issues to be overcome. Our recommendation is to examine both Manukau and Firth of Thames options to decide where the option should be created. The next issue is, should we expand at the current location or move? First of all, expansion at the current location doesn't solve the growth problem because the feasible expansion might not in the end be sufficient. Both alternative locations put forward could accommodate potential growth. Currently, on the cost-benefit analysis, the Manukau move is preferred to staying where we are. Firth of Thames is not, but it's likely that movement over time will increase the attractiveness of moving relative to expanding. And many port locations we note, relocations we note, are done because of social pressures, and there are important social pressures advocating a move now. Next question, when should we move? We should move either when we're running out of capacity or when we want to move because moving has become beneficial. The recommendation is to establish regular periodic triggers assessment to decide when to exercise the option. Perhaps because it's beneficial based on social, economic, environmental and cultural factors, because we have to, or perhaps circumstances change from what we expect and we may sometime in the future decide not to. What should we do in the meantime? Well, the scope is long-term. We have no mandate to decide short-term operational or regulatory issues, such as port developments. We should anticipate the likelihood that the port will be moved, but recognise that it cannot be moved for probably at least 15 or 20 years, given decision time, planning time and construction time. Meanwhile, the port needs to continue to operate in the interests of Auckland. The consultants, supported by work done in the context of the Central Wharves strategy, which is not complete, and by Port of Auckland Limited, all indicate that additional berth length is required. Cruise ships are getting longer, visits are increasing, multi-cargo capacity is a limitation at Bledisloe, and more longer berths will be needed to get us to the point where we might need to move. So the recommendation is conditional on releasing what will become a bottleneck, limiting balanced growth, and creating a relocation so the port can move, then the port should be constrained to the current footprint. The recommendations are a package, and that's important for two reasons. The first is that the strategy works as a whole. Picking parts of it may lead to unintended or unwanted consequences. And secondly, the combination of recommendations are at the heart of why and how the consensus working group's position was reached. There's been a lot of discussion in the media and otherwise about the wharf extensions at Bledisloe. Ours has been a strategic study. You'll see in the consultants' report a proposal for an east-west berth at the northern end of Bledisloe Wharf, and you'll have seen in the media some specific figures. There are no specific figures in our report. The issue was debated at the CWG. We had two options proposed. OY identified potential for a northern berth that added berth capacity within the existing footprint. Ports of Auckland offered a northern berth without reclamation, requiring an additional 40 metres northward extension to provide sufficient berth capacity. The Port of Auckland position is that the 40 metres is required to provide sufficient additional berth length, and the opposing view is that the additional 40 metres should not be allowed and a solution should be found within the existing footprint. We have not done the detailed study to determine how much additional capacity is needed and in what form. We're not port designers. We didn't have scope or resources to decide the short-term port design. We're not a regulatory body, and there are established mechanisms for approving port design changes. Our view is that consideration of these two options, along with others that might be better, should be undertaken to identify the best means to provide the berth capacity needed. I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Rick. Now, I've just noted Councillor Darby and the Mayor have got some recommendations they wish to move in second, so we'll just signal those. Also, I want to draw members' attention to the fact that we've all been receiving various bits and pieces of correspondence. Just to make sure that people have checked their emails, there was the correspondence from part of the CWG group. There was correspondence from a can't remember who, there was 3 separate bits of
Chamber of
correspondence
Commerce.
that's been circulated, and I also had a letter from Northport, which I'm happy to circulate. Okay,
Madam
so
Chair, is it possible to get a copy of that or get it printed out?
Madam Chair, I did just give copies to Tam, but there's been a
Right,
minor
so we-
change on one point.
okay, so rather, of the recommendations?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, so we just thought the bits in red are the only changes. So you've got the recommendations in front of you. Oh, they can be circulated. But just for ease of reading, those are the changes there that you see on the screen. So let's take questions of councillors. So we'll take questions on the presentation by Mr Boven, and then we'll move to the recommendations. Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Rick, for this work, and it must have been trying at times, I could perfectly understand, giving the divergent opinions around this issue.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that we have sort of 13 odd ports in New Zealand, what do you see as the relevant importance of a nationwide port protocol that delivers greater efficiencies of the existing structures that we have now?
Well, we didn't, the issue of a nationwide, a national port strategy was not part of our conversation. We did consider, especially once we had all the evidence, possible solutions that went beyond a relocation of the Auckland port, and in that context consider the prospects for a large-scale port serving northern regions. I think the position probably was that it would be valuable in considering the locations to consider wider options, and we mentioned the idea of a super port, and that would, I think, imply consideration at least of the northern part of New Zealand's port strategy, but it doesn't imply a national port strategy.
Okay. Madam Chair, I have a second question, if I may, Rick, and that's to do with the container TEUs and technology, Auckland's predominance of a car arrival, machinery arrival port, the numbers that are coming through there. So as we move through with greater technologies that have been identified with self-drive cars, machinery, trucks, etc., and with the containers and the TEU numbers out of the trigger points that you've potentially identified, how do you see technology potentially training those, and what margin of error does that potentially build into the discussions that are in the position in the consultant's report?
I think there's various estimates in the consultant's report, and they vary widely. I think port projection people will say, oh, you can project 30 or 40 years, but our scope was 50 years. My view is that there's sufficient uncertainty in the estimates that you would not want to be too sure getting out of that 30 or 40 year period there's quite a range of possibilities, even within the estimates. And then beyond the estimates are the more fundamental questions such as those that you're raising, which I mean really confirm that we are in a situation of trying to manage in a state of uncertainty. And that uncertainty will resolve itself with time, which is the reason why we're looking at stepping forward through regular periodic review to look forward and understand, give ourselves enough time, make sure we've got an option.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Could you just confirm for me the nature of the terms of reference for the group and expectations to speak as one voice? I mean, it seems to me that some of the dissent and the chair outlined some of the correspondence that we've had subsequent to the delivery of your report. In your opinion, is some of that dissent that is now public, is it breaching in any way some of the terms of reference, or what the members of both the reference group and the consensus working group signed on for?
So there's two kinds of contention, I guess. One would be communications from CWG members, and others. And having seen those communications, my view is that those do not stray from the consensus that was reached by the group. They are attempts to clarify and counter positions that are being taken by some and in the press that put a slant or a spin on it that isn't consistent. So I see those as clarification perspectives. There are other views that are being expressed by parties who are outside the consensus working group and who are unhappy with the conclusion, and generally, don't offer a full analysis, but a partial analysis based on their interests. The consensus working group's protocols really were that we would, keep things reasonably close to ourselves, and I was to be the media person, but that was really only up until the point at which we kind of went public with the conclusions. And this is subsequent. I don't think you can hold people to, not represent the interests of their organisation once the process is in effect complete from their point of view.
Yeah, good answer.
Okay, Councillor. Questions?
Well,
Councillor Wood.
Just in relation to, so I take it the Ferguson terminal, the container terminal, it's got capacity for a long time, as many years out from now. Would that be correct?
It has capacity, but in the time frame of the study, will given base case projections become constrained. That capacity requires further capital investment in automated equipment in order to achieve the handling capacity that is likely to be required. One interesting thing to note about that investment is that any investment in such capital equipment could be picked up and relocated to an alternative port. So you would not have a stranded asset problem if you did that.
Yeah, so they're the different types. This report has actually looked at the different types of technology that can be used there, IT technology and machinery, to increase the capacity considerably from even where it is now. But that capacity increase could occur in the short term without that expenditure, couldn't it?
We didn't look at the some capacity could be increased without expenditure, but the more capacity increase you require, two things happen. One is you have to put more capital in, and the other one is as you get up to the sort of 2 to 3 million TEU numbers, you start to become uncertain as to whether the capacity and what capacity will be delivered in the end.
That 2 to 3 could occur in their current in the current configuration.
Perhaps. I think that's debated. I think there's a reasonable degree of confidence about the 2. There's a pretty low degree of confidence about the 3. And given what we know now, it's probably somewhere in between.
Okay. So they're about 900,000 TEUs at the moment.
Yeah, probably. Around about that. A bit closer to a million, perhaps.
Okay, so that gives quite a bit of time. There's quite a bit of time that dwell between now and when that capacity of 2 to 3 million will be reached.
Well, that depends on the growth rate. The consultant's earliest indications would give us a reasonably limited amount of time when you consider how long it might take to make a decision and to go through the planning and consenting and consultation processes, and then design and construct a port.
Thank you. Member Ngāmane?
Kia ora koutou, kia ora Rick. Just a couple of questions. The first one is just noting the comments that you relayed earlier in the piece around Karen Wilson's position, and she was the Waiahua rep on the CWG working group. I'm just querying whether that ought to be noted in the body of recommendations, given that the title is Consensus Working Group, and consensus hasn't been reached. That communication was released. Was received post the handover of our document. So you're saying consensus was reached in your understanding?
In my understanding, consensus had been reached. I think that there was a meeting that Karen did not attend where consensus was reached, and there were communications directly with people who were not at that meeting to test the conclusions. And then Karen was at subsequent meetings, and after those subsequent meetings made the communication to me. So it was just awkward in terms of the timing. I would much prefer to have had the opportunity to put that in the document, but we didn't get there.
That's a query, probably, for the body and recommendation in terms of whether consensus has been reached given that comment. The second one, the second comment is a bit of comment in the CWG report about additional efforts going to be required to look at mana whenua values, cultural assessments and the alternative locations. Do you think that ought to be highlighted too, the need for that? Because I am aware that as we've gone through the port study at each recommendations of council, there's been a signal for the need for an assessment, and I don't know your sense of it certainly wasn't able to be done in the body of this port just because of the timing, etc. But I wonder whether that statement ought to flow through to the recommendations to the new council too, that there's an expectation that there is a more comprehensive cultural assessment of alternative options. So that was just something else I wonder that's missing potentially from the recommendations.
I think in the recommendations of the consensus working group, I think that's highlighted.
Yes.
I think it's not my judgment really as to what
but
you
I'm
highlight
just
here.
It was highlighted in the SWG report.
Yeah, certainly think. I should say that I certainly think that it will be very important to do that going forward. One of the things that created some challenges for us was that I think it was pretty clear that none of the expansion options were attractive to those that we spoke with, and that meant that not only from a process point of view, but from a content point of view, there was considerable further work required. And having discovered that, it wasn't a lot of time or value for us in getting a very deep understanding of that because of the importance of picking it up at the next stage.
And just the third question, it's more of a general one. So there was like a multi-criteria kind of framework used to look at alternative options. Did, in doing that and coming to the two areas, I just want to get a sense of, for example, somebody could say a port at the end of Great Barrier, like, I know, shock horror, but when I actually look at values potentially on the undeveloped site that's been identified around the Firth of Thames, and I look at that objectively, some of those values could be similar as, say, an island of the Gulf versus the Firth of Thames. So how broad did it kind of look at that? That's all I'm saying. For example, if an area of an undeveloped nature with a lot of values, ecological, etc. values, can be identified as an option, then similarly, was that span or that lens looked closer to home? Closer into the inner harbour? I'm just wondering. I just want to get a sense of that there wasn't a not in my backyard element in this option selection.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the short answer to that is nobody wants a port in their backyard except possibly Northport. So, let me just talk a little bit about the process, because the process was to scan the coastline and understand where it might be technically feasible to put a port. And then there was a process of multi-stage narrowing down to where more attractive options amongst those were. And it was clear that cultural and environmental disadvantages existed for most of the location options. And so then the question is, are we narrowing in the appropriate way? And we did some kind of sensitivity analysis around that. For example, we removed all the physical and financial and economic analysis and just looked at the cultural and environmental and social, and we still got the same kind of ranking out of it. And I guess the other thing that I was always alert to was keeping my ears open for people who were saying, oh, but you've left out the end of Great Barrier Island, for example. And there wasn't any of that. So it left us with a reasonable degree of comfort. Certainly the MCA is not an analysis is not a tool to do a cultural assessment. It's a tool to kind of filter options and remove the least attractive one so you can focus on the most attractive one. And I think in that respect it worked reasonably well.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just highlight the idea of maybe including something around the need for a cultural impact assessment on alternative options, just as a consideration?
You want to jotting around with
Wording?
the words,
Yep.
Leanne? Yeah.
Got it up there.
Is it?
Yeah, we'll just have a look at 3 and see if that doesn't, or G3, if that doesn't meet your needs, have a little look and I'm sure we can come back to that. Councillor Quacks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rick, thank you very much for the hard work that you've done on behalf of the people of Auckland, you and your group. And I just want to clarify something in my own mind. But in any way, do the number of TEUs relate directly to the population of Auckland?
They do, in the sense that there's an important relationship as you go through time. The interesting assessment is when you start to compare ports in terms of the number of TEUs per person within the kind of catchment area for the port, or the distribution area for the port, and the numbers are all over the place. And so that's why it's sort of useful to think about it if you assume that the trade is going to stay the same, but you just run into this fundamental uncertainty that how would you make an assumption over more than 50 years that the trade is going to remain the same?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks. Just in terms of some of the sections of this report, and I understand the long-term nature of the focus of the group. Obviously, as you'll be aware, it's the shorter-term focus that's probably exercising everyone's mind. I just wondered within the general discussions, particularly as it goes to multi-cargo and cruise vessels, there's a number of comments made there in respect of what appears on the face of it anyway to be options or other ways of doing things, and that's kind of implicit in some of our recommendations. Was there much detail or overseas experience drawn upon in respect of options with those two things, the cargo and the cruise ships? And it hasn't been, I know it hasn't been captured in the recommendations, but is there sufficient possibilities there to make some of these concerns with respect of the short-term obsolete or able to be met in some way? Did that come through the discussions given some of the expertise that was available?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. Certainly there was international experience brought to the study, and there was an international port marine kind of consultant specialist attached to the EY study who would have dealt with those issues. And we also had access to, very good access to the port's information. Perhaps not as much as a consultant might have liked all the time, but certainly got a lot of input from the port. But we were not trying to solve that problem. We were trying to solve another problem, which was to understand what the demand and the supply were going to be, not the configuration.
I guess just in terms of where the council sits, that meshing up of the long term, which was your focus, and the short term, sort of provides possibilities that are helpful in terms of decisions that are going to be reached now, though, doesn't it? I mean, it's fine to have that long-term focus, but there's things that we're considering that information has been passed in one form or other that will inform our decisions. I guess I'm just wondering, other than Googling things, what the ability is to research that expertise, given some of the, contrary or on the face of it, differences of interpretation or emphasis that are now being put forward.
Well, I think the important thing is that given that you've got two options on the table for the short term, and neither of them are really very satisfactory, and given that there's going to be a need to resolve that with a lot of scrutiny, I imagine, we really need to do something fairly fundamental that tries to identify a better option that meets the medium term or the short and medium term requirements, and meets the aspirations of many Aucklanders who would prefer not to go there. But I think the important thing from our point of view is that over the near term, we need to ensure that the port is able to operate with balanced growth. So the thing we don't want to do is find ourselves in a position where we've got a port with some 15, 20, 30, whatever it is, years of headroom that ends up being constrained by one particular bottleneck that you can't unlock. And so that's the reason why we have to find a solution to this berth length issue around the cruise and multi-cargo. And I think we could have spent quite a bit of time on that. It would have been very contentious, but we were really working on our main activity, which was to develop the long-term strategy.
Yeah, I think there's a really subtle line there, Councillor Watson, that you've identified, and I think that's the complexity that we're trying to grapple with. Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the hard work. It must have been an interesting experience. Essentially, you're saying that presently the number of containers going through or coming through ports of Auckland is about 1 million TEUs, and that there is capacity according to ports employing different technology and so on for 3 million. Is that right? Okay, so and that to move the port would cost, to relocate the port would cost about 5 billion. Does that relocated port include rail and road links?
Yes, it includes the landside transport connections.
All up package.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the big differences between the Manukau and the Firth of Thames options, obviously because the connection links are longer and more challenging in the Firth of Thames.
It's not entirely a question of a landsperson approach, is it? If you talk to anyone who's been to sea, that they are very dubious about any possible port in the Manukau because of the Manukau Bar, which in terms of navigation is extremely challenging, especially for bigger ships. So that has influenced you?
Yes, well, really in two layers, I suppose. You're absolutely right. As soon as you raise the question of the Manukau, well, why would you put a port there? The initial consulting work that was done, in effect, designed a channel and some engineering around the bar to make it accessible. Given that we knew that was going to be contentious, we had that peer reviewed. As a result of the peer review, the consultant changed the design, which increased the costs, but didn't change the sort of ordering, the rank ordering of the alternatives. And at the end, I guess the conclusion was that it looked as if you could construct a navigable, effective, safe harbour there. Ongoing dredging, engineering, and so on, are not unusual from the point of view of harbour management. However, both the consultant and the peer review said that needed to be subject to more detailed assessment. I think when you consider the longer time horizons and potential changes in climate and so on, that needs to be done with a very careful and specialist technical lens, and it wasn't a lens that was available to us in the time and scope of the study.
Thank you. And just one more question. In terms of port expansion, which is always assumed to be into the harbour, and obviously the reason why you carried out the study is cannot be divorced from the public opposition to further extension. Was undergrounding Quay Street considered in any way? Or in other words, expanding the port inland, was that considered in any way?
It did come up, and there were some options considered, but the view, I think, was that with the investment possibilities on the container side, the big issue was the big issue was really getting the berth length, and expanding in towards the city doesn't solve the berth length problem.
Didn't solve the berthing.
The berth length problem.
The problem keeps changing from storage problems to berthing problems wherever. Have you found that?
Well, yes, and I think it takes a little while to untangle that. We actually have, three kinds of constraints on the port. One is the land area, which is essentially driven by, in our port, it's driven by the storage of containers and the technology you use to handle them. And then the second area of constraint is in the berth length, which interestingly in our port is currently on the cruise ships and on the multi-cargo. So we've got different constraints kind of on the two different major activities there. And then the third area is your landside connections. And we didn't do design work on the landside connections.
I suppose your work is over, but I just, my advice in terms of cruise ship berth length is it's not a major. If the Queen Mary can berth alongside in the Port of Auckland, there's not many ships longer than that, which a Dolphin couldn't solve. And the fact of the matter is, the beauty of cruise ships is that they can actually sit out in the harbour. But anyway, it's really an investment business case option. If you want to bring cruise ships alongside and spend a huge amount of money and put up with public opposition, then you have to have a really good business case to prove it, and that'd be interesting to see. Thank you anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Lee, and I think the Councillor Darby and the Mayor's recommendations pick up some of those issues. I've got Councillor Brewer, Member Taipiri and Councillor Wood, and then I think we should move to the recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My issue is possibly one for you as Chair to address and/or officers. In our, I point members to our agenda 169, page 169. In our original agenda, we were given two options as recommendations to choose either or, option 1 or option 2. Without explanation, we're now heading down option 2. And I suppose I just want to table my concern that option 1 has been discarded at this point without discussion. That is to refer the Consensus Working Group recommendations and report and consultants report to the incoming council, full stop. I suppose my question is around some explanation as to why we've discarded option 1 and instead 8 days before nominations opening, we are going down a process of sending the Chief Executive off to do some very specific work around investigating a location, a preferred location, when I would argue, Madam Chair, that there might just be a miracle, the next mayor might not see such work or incoming council as an absolute priority. And so I would rather see the CWG and the EY reports lie on the table, be given to the incoming council unvarnished, and for the Chief Executive and the executive team to pick up the work if it is requested at that point, rather than they inherit directions that we're giving them, that we don't have a mandate for, that will be a big part of this upcoming local body elections. And so If it is an alternative, if it is an alternative amendment, I certainly would like to see refer the consensus working group recommendation F and supporting consultants to the incoming council, full stop, and for G I will certainly won't be supporting all that work starting from today without the mandate of an incoming mayor or incoming council.
Are you moving?
Yeah.
Well, just hang on, you can't have two recommendations on at once. This is simply, there's one option or the other. No one's taken option one off the table. Option two's been moved. If that's voted down, then you vote on option one. So I'm sorry, Councillor Brewer, there's no political conspiracy there. It simply is just as it is.
Well, no, you've adopted option two by including everything below G. That is option two. Option one is to refer it to the incoming council, full stop. And so do not say that this is incorporating both options. No, this is very much starting the work today. And I'm saying let's go back to option one, full stop.
So all I'm saying from the chair, councillor, is if option two is voted down, then one can go back to option one, which simply leaves it lying on the table for the incoming council. So
well, my question, Madam Chair, is why has option one been discarded without discussion? Why? Who has made that decision?
No one's made the decision. Councillor Darby
option
and the
one
mayor
or
have
option
moved.
two?
I can see we can be circular here.
Madam Chair, in our report, it is option one or option two. You have instantly gone for option two and are now laying into me for daring to raise option one. I am saying, why did you discard option one? Why are you trying to make the decision now without any political mandate?
Nice try, Councillor Brewer. I'm a little bit tired of being accused of things that aren't happening. Let's have a process
Some honesty,
explanation
please.
from our
Exactly
staff.
what's happening.
Oh, Councillor Brewer, settle down.
So in the preparation of this report, two options were considered. The do nothing option, which you have and is still live before you, and the do some preparatory work option. So if you look at the resolution, in particular the items in G, they're effectively getting some elements started, a process to investigate. Scope based on matters but included in the consensus working group. Develop a short list of independent third parties. So the intention was not to provide an alternative that allowed some thinking to go in without actually doing the work. So, but that's certainly what you'll be debating, and I agree with the Deputy Mayor and the Chair of this committee that if option two doesn't succeed, then option one remains on the table and hasn't been taken off at any stage.
Well, Madam Chair, just on that, my concern is this preparatory work might not come to anything because an incoming mayor and council might not see it as a priority or have the mandate to head towards a preferred option. My concern is that we've spent over $1 million already, and let's hold that. It doesn't seem like it's absolutely time critical, that it doesn't have to be sorted in the next 3 months. I would like to see us hold that $1 million cost, not add to it, and for the incoming council to see these reports and make their decisions with a full public mandate as to what they do with them and what they instruct the chief executive. Not us make that decision 8 days before nominations open.
Why don't we hear from the mover and seconder, which I think may hopefully clarify some of the issues. Councillor Darby, would you like to speak to...
Are we in debate?
Oh, no, we're not in councillor. I'm just trying to bring... Well, let's just try and bring a bit of clarity to this. We've had questions which have been asked. Sorry, what was that, Councillor?
I just have brought some clarity. You weren't going to take us through option one and option two, but I've taken the liberty, so that's the clarity I've added.
Not even going to go there. Councillor Darby, would you like to bring some clarity to the debate? You've raised your recommendations, which have been moved by yourself and seconded by the Mayor. Questions have been asked about the recommendation that you're wanting to move. I'm going to ask you to speak to that.
Do you want me to speak to the motion or just clarify the question of the councillor?
A bit of clarity would be appreciated.
So just in reply to the question raised by Councillor Brewer, I don't think we stopped governing yesterday or today. I think we have a responsibility to continue in governance of this council on very large strategic issues which are of great importance to millions of Aucklanders, or at least 1.5 million approaching. So I just want to clarify too, Councillor Brewer, you said that these motions start to instruct the Chief Executive to start to investigate options. They don't say that. They actually, as the Chief Operating Officer outlined, it asks the Chief Executive Officer to start to scope the triggers and to put in place a process for identifying the investigation stage, and then also to look at look at some options around an independent-led process for the rigorous identification of sufficient berth space, etc. So it does not set us on a course that is going to burn through millions of dollars of investigative options as outlined by Councillor Brewer. It does not do
I've
that
never
at all.
mentioned that.
I'm sorry.
But wait 3 months.
Hang on, councillors, can
Sorry,
we just, we listen to
probably
you,
on the audio
councillor? Can
record.
you,
Oh, did I say millions of dollars?
Can I speak to the motion, Madam Chair, as seconded by?
let's just make sure that we haven't got any further questions. Councillor Wood, is yours a question?
Yes, mine is a question, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify with Dr. Boven, the issue of Bledisloe, which is one of your recommendations, recommendation 4. You say that the consultant has recommended a northern east-west berth at Bledisloe Wharf, and that the consensus working, or CWG, is in agreement that a northern berth represents a viable short-term option. Exact specifications to meet future berth demand will be worked through. So that's nothing. That's the multi-cargo. Is it multi-cargo situation? Vessels, multi-cargo vessels on Bledisloe. So that's a berth across the end of the wharf, perpendicular to the wharf. I'm just trying to clarify there that was agreed by the consensus working group, was it?
Yes, it was. It was yes.
And that berth would be required for the viability of the multi-cargo handling capacity of Port of Auckland.
So the issue with handling capacity is that you need to have a balanced growth on the port. So you need handling capacity not for today, but further to take us forward during the short term until the port moves.
Yeah.
So the challenge, because of cruise and multi-cargo, including the vehicle vessels, is to provide sufficient berth lengths to give us that kind of headroom to up to the balanced growth, and the option that was identified for an east-west berth by the consultant was accepted by Ports of Auckland Limited and accepted as an option by the CWG, largely because it provided a contribution to the additional berth space. Now the question that remains is, given the amount of berth space that the port thinks that it needs, that's where the argument comes over how that berth space will be provided.
And I take it Port of Auckland haven't got any fixed views on how that's going to happen at this stage, or have they? Have they brought fixed views to the table?
The port has done some preliminary design work. I certainly wouldn't characterise the port's position with the CWG as a fixed position. I would say rather it was a collaborative, creative position.
Okay, and that would also give additional berth. They were looking for additional berths for the berths on Bledisloe that are there at the present time.
Yeah, the issue really is how much berth length and how many ships can you accommodate on the western side of Bledisloe.
Okay. And was the Captain Cook Wharf, was that part of the discussions as well?
It was, but only in the sense that we had a look at the Central Wharf strategy, which is not complete and finalised, and we recognised from that there were a couple of forces operating. The first one was a requirement for more berth length for crews, which would impact the multi-cargo and Bledisloe capacity, but also that as berth capacity was being provided for cruise expansion and for public use, that would put increasing pressure on the multi-cargo Bledisloe capacity.
So there was a trade-off. They were talking about a trade-off there, were they, between Captain Cook and Bledisloe?
Not explicitly, no.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Councillor Wood, clear? I've got member Taiperi and then member Councillor Penrose and Councillor Cashmore, and then I'm just going to ask Dean to comment. We've got a lot of confusion around the table about the timing of this, so actually Dean, maybe you go first and then we'll hear from member Taiperi, Penrose and Cashmore. Because I think Councillor Brewer is incorrect in the assumptions that he's put forward.
Okay. So we're waiting for 3 months for the Chief Executive to start.
So just to reaffirm that both options 1 and option 2 are on the table. Option 1 is the do nothing option, in which case it'll be brought to the next council and you'll have the discussion that council chooses to have. Option 2 is only seeking to make some recommendations to the next council, and I refer you to G. Request the Chief Executive to consider the Consensus Working Group's recommendations and report, as well as supporting consultants document, and to refer to the incoming council a process, a scope, and a short list. And that just enables some things to be worked quietly on in the background, but no work to be done. So the decisions would then need to be made by the future council. There is no budget for this work currently.
I hope that clarifies it. I think there's been a kind of a shift in interpretation
Well,
here.
Madam Chair, if there's no work or no budget, I suggest we remove all those references to all the work and all the implied budget that is from G onwards.
Okay. We're sure that will be canvassed. Member Taiperi.
Ka nui te mihi ki a koe, Madam Chair, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou tēnei wā. So I just reminded myself of the first study and I thought the lack of information and advice around economic opportunities for Māori, investment opportunities for Māori, employment opportunities for Māori. And so last term we agreed by resolution to have the study 2 do that. I don't know if I've seen that, Madam Chair, and I get the feeling it's pending another report to get that information. Can you confirm that or otherwise, please?
I think the Port Future study was, I think at one stage up to a list of 90 criteria that needed to be considered as we narrowed the port options from a very wide range to a very small range of options. Detailed assessment on the implications of each of those options was not done. There was a multi-criteria analysis which actually across a very large number of options considered what were in effect light investigations and then estimation of a rating that went into the multi-criteria analysis. I think the stage that it's really appropriate to do the analysis that you're referring to is very much the next stage, because it's in the next stage we've got some really live options on the table where that work would be important to do and would inform the conclusions.
Madam Chair, so I thought it was appropriate when the council made a resolution to do so with a brief for the study 2. So I don't understand why it wasn't done. I also know that Councillor Clow spent some time emphasising his concern that he felt that study 2 was all about Māori, which was not true, of course. And now I'm sort of hearing, oh well, there's a bunch of 90 things. So I'm a bit lost on that one, Madam Chair. No, Councillor Clow had a shot at it early in the term when we were going on about the study 2, and he was concerned that the terms were getting far too emphasised in Māori, and we tried to explain to him if he'd been in the first term, he'd have worked out that there was a resolution affecting that because it was excluded from the study 1. So I just wanted to make it clear, Madam Chair, that I do find it concerning that it just keeps going on and on and on to another report. I can hear the context of when there's a specific location, then maybe that information will be easier to grasp and obtain. But I think we've missed the boat on this one as well, Madam Chair. I wanted to make that a strong record on that, because we pushed very hard. We worked with Harvey Brooks in the first term when he was responsible for economic development to actually get this realised. I feel we've missed it again, and I'm just getting concerned that it's just going to go over to another report, and I'm raising my concerns that it just keeps getting missed. I hear the rationale. I accept partly that, but I still think not enough was done in this report to address the resolution of council that sought that to be done. Kia ora, Madam Chair.
Kia ora. Councillor Penrose.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And having been one of the councillors, one of 3 councillors from day one that supported some reclamation down at the ports for the 2 reasons of A, making way for some of our larger vessels, i.e. in particular our cruise ships that coming into New Zealand now. And it was sad when we seen the latest one that come in early last year, late last year, having to park up in the channel and people having to be commuted across by barge, not by barge, but by tug. To me, this doesn't make sense. And I was only talking myself as a small reclamation to be able to accommodate some of these bigger vessels. But Madam Chair, I would have thought, and it's sad that it's come at this time of the year leading up to an election where we've got mayoral candidates and we have councillors and board members getting involved in the debate, when I would have thought that we've got bigger fish to fry at the moment, i.e. housing, transport and employment. And when the ports are going well, if it's not broke, don't fix at this stage, that we're now debating this, and I think that's quite sad. So at this stage, Madam Chair, I won't be supporting these recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Penrose. We'll go to Councillor Cashmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This one's probably to Jacques, if I may. And that's, what is the correlation between what is suggested in G3, which is about identification, evaluation of the existing port to enable it to be proficient for another 30 or 40 years, as compared to the future port study or parts thereof? Because they must be surely identifying one and the same or similar things.
If we could just get G3 up there.
Sorry.
I'm just looking for G3.
Yep. Can we just go up?
The work proposed an identification evaluation of the existing.
So the way that I understand it, G3 is about the short term, and it is specifically about how this berth length is accommodated. It is not about the long term, which is the investigation of the alternative options.
That's what I'm talking, as compared to the port study work that we are already doing, there must be some similarities or correlation there.
Sorry, which port study work?
Future, the port study that's work we've been undergoing, we've seen papers on all this term. Central Wharf strategy.
I'm not an expert on the Central Wharf strategy. Can you answer that better than I can? Are you an expert on the Central Wharf?
I wouldn't claim to be an expert, but
These two issues are bundled, need to be bundled together.
Yeah, that's my point, Madam Chair.
Sorry, we might have just missed the...
Well, I think they're one and the same, or very, very
Councillor
similar.
Wilson.
Central Wall Strategy and G3 are the same thing. We've probably already preloaded a lot of that work already.
We're doing.
So,
Yeah.
so what I understand Councillor Cashmore saying is that G3 needs to take into account the work done through the Central Wall Strategy.
Yeah. But why do we need it? Yes. And we did, you know, this is somewhat stating the obvious, but it's there nonetheless. Councillor Watson.
That answers my question.
Yep. Happy with that? Councillor Crum.
Thank you. So just on the issue of the interim options for birth length, in your report and noting the email that we received last night from 7 CWG members, your report does not mention the call, as they have referred to, for an independent third party to undertake that analysis, but yet we have in G3 a recommendation before us to compile a short list of independent third parties.
Yeah,
so
correct.
Can you just highlight some of the process for why your group didn't recommend that? It's not there, but we had that before us, so this would help us with our decision making on G3.
So so I understand, and I'm not an expert on this at all, but I understand the normal consenting process doesn't require consideration of a number of options. The consensus working group agreed that the work that needed to be done needed to look more widely at a range of options, because the two that were on the table didn't seem to be entirely satisfactory, and we weren't convinced there wasn't a third somewhere lurking there that could be uncovered. There was discussion about whether such a consideration of options should be done independently, but there was not agreement within the consensus working group as to the inclusion of that word independent, and it was not included.
Okay.
So, Chair.
Well, hang on. I've still got Councillor Watson was okay. I've got Councillor Lee, Councillor Casey, Councillor Wood. And Stewart. So these, just being clear, these are questions at this stage, and then I think we may need to move to the recommendations, because we're becoming a little bit circular in this debate. Councillor Lee.
Okay, setting aside the 5 billion cost of building an alternative port sometime in the future, what is of much more urgency is the need, and this does relate to cruise ships and berth length, to translocate the bulk liquids from Wynyard Point, thus enabling the longest wharf in the harbour to be used for cruise ships or whatever. So rather than moving the whole port, was there any work done with it, consideration given within the process to an alternative site for the bulk liquids plant on the tank farm?
No, there was not.
Okay. Thank you. That's what we should be doing. Needed soon for the headland park.
And that's part of exactly what's being proposed here, that work be done. I think, councillors, we're kind of talking past each other. There's an awful lot of common agreement around the table, but we just don't seem to be hearing each other. Councillor Stewart.
No, I was just wondering, could we look at having a national study of ports? Because I just wonder whether, if that happened, whether this would all be overridden. Because I think we really do need to look at what's happening right through the country, and I just don't think really we've done that as good as we could have. And I think we really need to make sure whatever we're going to do, we're not going to then have to redo the whole thing again. Has that been looked at?
We didn't consider the issue of whether a national ports study or strategy should be developed. However, we did conclude that in considering location options at the next stage, you needed to consider wider issues than simply those of Auckland, and needed to consider Upper North Island issues.
Councillor? Yep. Councillor Casey?
It's just to follow on what other people are asking, really. You said that relocation of bits of the port would be covered in G, but there is no budget for G. Can I just ask the acting chief executive how we're going to do G if there is no budget? Or is there a budget and it can be done?
Trying to establish a budget.
The work on G is relatively light touch at this stage, and it's what we would normally do in terms of assisting the pre-work so that we could actually go to market, but to get the assistance that we would require, for example, in G3. So all we're doing is identifying the process, identifying a scope so that triggers can be identified, and shortlisting independent third parties. So that would be covered in business as usual. The doing of the work that sits in behind those would need to be properly budgeted, scoped and budgeted.
So the bits of the port relocation issue which Councillor Lee just raised would be covered in the new scope?
So if you're looking at doing substantive piece of work, port relocation activities, that is all in that work that is yet to be approved by the incoming council.
So, but the bits of the port, the question that Mike asked was about the bits of the port, not just the whole port.
I mean, this is serious work. This is not kind of a consensus talking shop thing.
And the answer was it'll be covered in G, but yes, no?
Well, G is not going to literally do the work that you ask for.
No,
G
I know
is
that.
setting out the scope.
Will it be included in the scope, is my question.
Oh, will it be included in that? Sorry, my mistake, Councillor
Right.
Casey. It will be included in the scope.
It will be. Thank you. That's great.
Hopefully we're getting a bit clearer. The reality is this work, the bulk of this will be done by the next council. The choice, councillors, is we can just say the do nothing option. It's just wait, kick it to touch to the next council. If that's the way people vote, they do. This is saying, or for the next council, a bit of pre-work could be done to say this is the kind of work that you want to have happen, and in the shorter term, work needs to be done to understand what the retooling of the port area may require. So, you know, it's a simple political choice, whichever way you go. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you. Madam Chair, I want to go back to the Central Wharf strategy. Mr Victor might be able to tell us more about that, because I remember Rick Walden came along and talked about how the wharves were going to be used, and I think it was Queen's Wharf would be freed up, cruise ships moved to Captain Cook Wharf, and that would mean that the activities of the Port of Auckland on Captain Cook would have to move to somewhere else. So how is those initiatives being integrated into what we're doing here, and where is that work, the Central Wharf strategy at the present time? Because I don't think we've had it back yet.
No. So let me say again, I'm not involved in the Central Wharf strategy, so I am no expert on it. However, the Central Wharf strategy was put on hold pending this work. It wanted to see what the outcome of this work was before it then carries on. So not the other way around.
Who decided that?
I think it was this committee.
I don't recall that happening. Well, anyway, because I've kind of been trying to reconcile the two pieces of work together, and which takes precedent over which.
Yeah, so the Central Wharf strategy isn't finalised. It was put on hold pending this work, the way that I understood it.
We asked for that because the confusion was as soon as we'd report anything on the Central Wharf strategy, it was seen to cut across the discussion and debate on the port strategy and the future of the port. So we said it's confusing to be doing the two in parallel. Let's hold off the one pending the outcome and discussion of the port strategy. We made that decision quite clearly.
Yeah, and also, just to note, I think the Central Wharf strategy focuses more on cruise. That's what its focus was. And so I think that's the point that Councillor Cashmore raised. If one is going to go to G3 to look at all the options that there might be in terms of the short-term issue, then you have to take the work that has been done on the Central Wharf strategy into account on that.
Okay. So I wish we would know. I wish I'd know where the Central Wharf strategy had actually got to, because they were talking about building a dolphin at the end of Captain Cook Wharf, which would have meant. Councillor Lee, my recollection was that there was to be a dolphin built at the end of the Captain Cook Wharf, which would enable some fairly substantial ships, passenger ships, to come into that wharf, as opposed to Queen's Wharf.
Yep.
So I think we're in the dark at the moment in relation to.
I think you're confused, Councillor Wood.
I'm not confused, Councillor Lee. I think you're confused.
No. This is not helpful either way, gentlemen.
Okay.
Mr. Victor or Mr. Boven or Mr. Shepherd, can you just remind us again the relationship between the Central Wharf strategy and the port study, and the timing by which the two will intersect, and is the dolphin still on the still on the agenda or not?
So I can only, like I say, I'm not involved in the Central Wharf strategy and wasn't involved, so, but I can only tell you how I understand this. Work was done on the Central Wharf strategy and I had a number of ideas in there. Because of the confusion that it led to, pending other things around the port, the way that I understand it, a decision was made to put that work on hold.
Page 13 of our agenda, Tam's just pointed it out, which is a recurring item every month, which explains that.
And so that strategy was not continued with, and therefore was not a formal strategy of the council until this work was done. But the two things coming together, again, if one goes for G3, that is, if one follows that process, that's where the two would come together. If you do not go for G3, I would imagine that it's then also up to the incoming council, I suspect, to decide whether it wants to proceed with the Central Wharf strategy and whether it wants to take these recommendations from the CWG into account for that or not. That's how I understand it.
So it may be good now, I think, to move to the recommendations. If I'm trying to decide to divine my way through the level of tension around the room on this, it may be, Councillor Darby, you may wish to test, and you're speaking to the recommendations, whether this is an issue that people are concerned about, that we might be seen to be trying to tie the next council into a process. And I just think we need to, if that's the concern, genuinely put that on the table, because we're sort of talking around the edges of this, and I think we need to be honest about it. So, Councillor Darby, would you like to speak to your recommendation?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, look, I think just the first part of the motions are to acknowledge Dr. Boven and the 10 CWG members, and in particular I'd like to acknowledge the community representatives on the CWG. They're the unpaid ones, they're the ones that went to all the meetings and weren't getting paid for being there, along with the reference group members, and there were some 64, and then there were iwi members, I think of some 15 of iwi hapu Māori business leaders. So it was a very robust group of people. And we have a tome of material here before us, well, not so much a tome here with the Port Future Study, but the supporting EY document, probably all up around about heading towards 400 pages. So today we are receiving all that material, and there is clearly a lot more work to do. And Dr. Boven has said this is not exhaustive work. This is a very big Auckland issue. This is an issue, Madam Chair, that has been regularly on the front page of our daily paper in Auckland. It has been on the airwaves of RNZ. It has been on the televisions of us all being broadcast by the two major networks. And I don't anticipate that it's going to change in that regard, because it is an unresolved story. And we have to not stop governing today. We have a responsibility to continue governance and inform the incoming council. So today we're looking at 4 key recommendations, and they are the key recommendations are in the Port Future Study, and really they're in bold. If you see them there, 1, 2, 3, 4 in bold, supported by notes. But the recommendations themselves, and of course you can't uncouple them, but the core recommendations are actually in the bold. And they say that the port on the Waitemata is reaching its use-by date. Pretty clear, and crews will stay, but the year is near for the to deport the port, really. And there is also a requirement for comprehensive investigation of the Firth, of Thames location and the Manukau location, and to determine on those alternative locations. And then the third recommendation is to identify and confirm the relocation triggers. Very important. And then the last is to undertake a rigorous identification and evaluation of the options to provide sufficient berth length. It's not additional, it's sufficient. Now, I'm stressing that. That's what the words say in the recommendations. There's other language in the EY, but the recommendations talk about sufficient berth space. And there's a big difference between that and additional berth space. So the recommendations reflect that I'm putting up, and thank the Mayor for seconding, do reflect the consensus working group recommendations entirely. The words are not massaged, they are the words that are contained within the recommendations, and you can see them there. The D4, there's a slight change there because that was incorrect to use the words is likely to lead to adverse intended consequences. The report did not say that, it actually said could result. Just a minor, but I'm picking that one up. Then we go to the E, and the E is very important, and I think that's important for us all to support. The consensus working group did consider an extension. My understanding is, okay, we know that reclamation is off the table, but it was not. It is not a recommendation here from the consensus working group that wharf extensions should be supported. It is clearly not. It talks about sufficient. It does not mention additional, but mentions sufficient. And it is important also to note this in fact and record it in that resolution, hopefully. And it's also important that there is further rigorous identification of alternative berthing options required. So going forward, the focus is on scoping and developing a process. It's not embarking on doing all that work. Now, a number of questions have been raised here today about why we should not embark on that work. There's no suggestion here in the words on the screen that we'll be embarking on a full-blown investigation. It's setting it up for the next council rather than they come in, that council comes in and are left cold. We have to continue governing, Madam Chair. And the council has led this process but not been part of the process. And I think this Port Future Study is unique in the way that we instructed it and then stepped aside. I think it's absolutely unique. I think it's a template for how a council can do its business by including its communities in the broader sense more in the way going forward. So I did change the words on the three. Initially I had the three as a council-led process, and I'm picking up on Councillor Crumb's question there. And I guess by going back to independent, we're just further endorsing how we embarked on this process to begin with. We embarked on a process that we instructed, but then it was independently led by Dr. Boven without political interference along the way. And I'm just suggesting that has proven to be good. Let's continue with that pattern. Now, I just want to touch on a few suggestions in that EY report, and this is why I think we do need to scope and work up the process now. The EY report does talk about that horizon of berth capacity being reached as being 3 to 12 years. 3 to 12 years. 3 years is actually not a long way away. So if you lose 6 months now because you don't want to do anything, because you don't want to govern today, that could actually put a lot of pressure on the next council because we don't know, you know, how close that is. It 2.5 to 3 years? Is it 3 years to 5 years? I think we unnecessarily put pressure on the next council, taking into account that horizon that is highlighted there in the EY report. Also, there is risk if we do nothing that another party does something. And I don't really want to name a party here, but I have seen a party talk about proceeding with designing wharves. Now, I would be quite worried if a party started to proceed to design wharves. If we sign up to G3, we actually signal that that and other work can be accomplished within the body of work that hopefully the next council then commits to, having considered a scoping study on it. It's pretty clear that the current footprint through to the medium term will last, but the report, the EY report, does stress that there is it uses the term a burning platform for change. So there is some urgency about this, members. The EY report is pretty clear that there is some urgency for not sitting on our hands and not just giving it to others 6 months hence. One councillor Penrose said there are bigger fish to fry. I don't think I can think of a topic that's come before this council where 1,000 boats have occupied the Waitemata Harbour and sailed and motored in rotation in protest, and 3,000 have gathered on the wharf, and then a second protest of around about 2,000. This is a very big topic for Aucklanders. So I think we need to heed the community interest in this, and they fully expect us to progress this work, not abandon it. So, councillors, we are the ongoing stewards and guardians, and we have a broad range of responsibilities here, and I'm saying that we cannot, this council cannot afford to backslide into those old battle lines that we saw on the harbour that day and on Queen's Wharf. That would be a dangerous position. So let's build on the general consensus, and I acknowledge that one member of the consensus building group has clearly made clear to us that she does not support the recommendations, but let's take those next steps, because this is a very big issue for Auckland, and we're also talking about a commercial enterprise that also needs some clear signals. Needs a clear signal to the commercial market, needs a clear signal to the people of Auckland, the 1.5 million Aucklanders here. So we're not signing off on the deportation order today for the port, we are just progressing it, as I'm sure the consensus working group would expect us to be doing, and Aucklanders expect us to be doing. So on that, Madam Chair, I commend these recommendations, and I thank you for considering them, the Mayor for considering them and seconding them. I think this is the correct way forward, not kicking it for touch. We need to continue to govern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillor. So speaking to the motion, I've got councillor Crum.
Thank you. I think you might have mentioned the term, Councillor Darby, just a slight massage of words. So on that theme, can I zero in on a word, well, possibly two? So in G3, for the alternate wording that we find ourselves up on the screen, where it says that we'll take provision being in an economically, socially, culturally and environmentally acceptable manner. I'd signal how problematic that could become definition of acceptable, and would suggest that matching what is now up in E, same topic, but much reduced wording, and then also signalling that in G2, where is it on the screen now, in the blue, where the same words, economic, environmental, social, cultural, is talking about an impact assessment. I think the difference between impact assessment taking into account versus acceptable manner are two very different things, and we should be careful of what huge variation there would be on what constitutes an acceptable manner. So alternative wording could be economically, socially, culturally and environmental factors taken into account, competing uses for the city and so on. If you're amenable.
Madam Chair, do you want me to reply to that now?
Sorry, we've just lost for a second. So you're talking to G2, the blue wording.
G3.
I'm just, yep, G3.
The use
so
of
I'm just trying to-
acceptable manner and signalling how problematic
Yep.
that could be, and suggesting deletion of that, and perhaps wording along the lines of taking into account. And I'm signalling that that is in line with what's being put up in E. So it's just a...
Oh, right, I see what you're saying. So
keeping
you're
the
adding the
general
economically, socially, culturally, environmentally, taking into account, without you're wishing to remove acceptable manner. Is that basically the thrust of it? So I guess it's up to the mover and seconder to respond.
Happy to look at
that.
the words if you want to jot the words down. As I said, I didn't massage words. I took words that are actually in the report, and those words are lifted from the first paragraph of the executive summary. So they're exactly the words that I'm sure Dr. Boven would be very familiar with in terms of, sorry, is it? I think Dr. Boven wanted to say something.
The word acceptable has been lifted from our objective, and we certainly set out to endeavour to, and it was a compromise in a way. We wanted to be aspirational, and we at least wanted to be acceptable. I think the reality is it's very difficult to get a solution that's acceptable and to whom and to everyone. So I wouldn't want to defend the word acceptable in this context, because I think it's kind of it's important. It was part of our objective, but I think there is a risk of coming up with something that's acceptable from everybody's perspective. So I take your point.
So, Madam Chair, if it helps the member, it's the deletion of the word acceptable, but...
I'm happy to draft up some different words and...
Well, Madam Chair, if we have lunch or something, I've never met a thing where the proposer of the motion and a member, a councillor, are kind of having a discussion as to what the wording's going to be. We've got enough problems here trying to understand the word.
It happens all the time, and
No, this is an important matter, Madam Chair.
Yep, and it was to me, which is why I raised it.
It happens all the time, and if people wish to discuss either an amendment or a sensible deletion or addition of a word in the interests of the smooth running of a meeting, it's totally acceptable. It's done all the time around this table. I'll just see if there are any more speakers, and we'll have, speaking to the motion, Councillor Lee. Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess this could be one of those cases that the prophet Isaiah was thinking of when he said, "Take counsel together and it shall come to naught." But at least this consensus working group enabled a certain healing within the community, which was badly divided over the council's decision to go to the High Court and support the application to extend Bledisloe Wharf and Lost. And I guess if we're talking about $1 million cost of this process, we should all, not sure where we're including the $500,000 it costs to defend the port and the council and the High Court and to lose. But maybe it's 1.5. However, it's quite a lot of money, and I think that we should be very cautious about throwing more money into this process. There is a healing process. It's not quite worked because actually there isn't really a consensus despite all the best efforts of Dr. Boven and his team. Ports have come out and said they still want to extend. Other people have said that is not, members of the consensus working group have said that's not the consensus we agreed to. So I think that in terms of mandate, I think we have to go back to the public. I think the option of referring this to a new mayor and a new council and give them the opportunity to have a good look at it is a sensible one. I am aware about the concern that ports may charge off and seek a consent. In the end, that is a matter of governance in every sense and leadership in every sense of this council, which in the end is the ultimate owner, whether that happens or not. Governance indeed, and Councillor Darby is very strong on getting us to carry on governing. At the same time, he's worried about political interference and extols the value of independence. Well, you know, different interests are certainly not independent, whatever they are. And in terms of governing is also respecting the mandate, respecting the public. And I think there's a lot to digest in this report. I have to say, with all due respect, because it would have been a very difficult and challenging task, that there's not much in here that wasn't already known, coming out of previous studies by the Auckland Harbour Board and even the Ports of Auckland itself. But be that as it may, let's give the community and council candidates, many of them will be sitting here, mayoral candidates, to have a good look at this report and then with a fresh mandate act on it or otherwise. And so, Madam Chair, I am for supporting option 1, and that is, and I am opposed to carrying on this situation and spending more and more money on this process. And I have to tell you, I have serious doubts, grave reservations about the role of EY in all of this. They are the people we paid a lot of money for who recommended selling the port. They really do have a conflict of interest in this. So I raise that concern, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lee. Mr Mayor.
I just think it's really important to try and reflect a little bit about the context and the background of why this report was done at all, because we tend to forget. And through leading this city through 2 terms, the one, if you can call it a regret that I have in terms of our political decision making during that point in time, it was the fact that it would have been good to have started this process of really bringing together the group that we did in the first term rather than the second. But having said that, Rick, to you and the team, we gave you a poison chalice because in our city we have 1.6 million experts on the waterfront in Port of Auckland. Everyone has got an interest in this, literally. We own it. So not only is it there, but we own it, and we wear, as a community, not just this chamber, a number of different hats, which sometimes are not really reconcilable. But anyhow, we've given you that poison chalice and said, okay, we need you as the chair and the 75 representatives in the wider group to stop arguing. What we have been expert at in Auckland over 175 years of colonial, let alone pre-colonial, existence. We have been expert at not agreeing on things. And what you've done is actually present us with the opportunity, and Councillor Mike is right in this, of taking the heat out of it and of having a relatively mature debate about where we are and to give us a good framework about how we might go forward. It's not a framework built on what the port want or what the mayor or the council want and say that's the reason why I support this recommendation. This is not a discussion that ends today or ends in the election campaign or ends after that, because the Aucklanders won't allow it. Basically, we need to keep working with this issue
ensure that our council officers are connected with the issue and continue to develop and mature and tease this debate out. Because we know that there are short, medium and long-term issues here, and the short-term issues are going to require continued discussion, and we'll need to continue to be focused on those. We know that the report isn't overly focused on these, but we need a dolphin there. We need a third rail line out of the port to actually develop the inland port. We need a car parking building. If we can't extend out the port, we need to build up and in. And so those are the issues, the short-term issues that are going to require us to continue to take advice and report, whether it's from EY or whoever. So councillors, what we've been asked for to consider here today is not an abrogation of any mandates or anything like that. Crikey, we worked till the last day. This is basically an opportunity for us to keep engaged in this issue and keep our community well informed and engaged in the issues so that we can go forward. There are parts of this, and I'm looking at David and the Independent Māori Independent Māori Statutory Board, who feel that the report isn't as pertinent or appropriate as it might have been or could have been. This is not the end. This, I suspect, is going to be a long discussion, and particularly if it ends up with a genuine and serious intent to move the port. And the time frames there are from 3 to 30 years. And so that discussion will be a very, very live discussion from now and into the future. You know, when this discussion started, I was really strong that the port should stay. But the one thing that I agreed with is, look, put the arguments to me. Why would I change my mind? Why should I change my mind? Well, part of this report talks about the sustainability of the port maintaining its position there. And whether or not, if it doesn't grow out, what is its options? It can grow up or in, but how much of a challenge will that be? And will that provide as many challenges to us in terms of infrastructure as repositioning the port somewhere else? And I really think that it has been valuable to actually talk about where would that somewhere else be? Tauranga and Northport? I don't think so. How can you service a city growing at 3% per annum from 250 kilometres away? I think there are certain impracticalities there. But you've highlighted those and you start to tease those out. Going to require even more work into the years ahead. And then if it's within the Auckland area, Manukau, as a son of the south, boy oh boy, that harbour's got some challenges. And secondly, the further Thames, massive environmental challenges there, and I suspect iwi will be all over that like a rash. And then if we lived in Ningbo, one of our sort of sister cities, we'd absolutely be out in Great Barrier Island. We would have made that decision 10 years ago. But we live in this beautiful city. And so we have irreconcilables. We don't want to sell out, some don't want to sell our port, some do want to sell our port. Some don't want to move the port, but won't allow it to grow where it presently stands. Some want a port that is strongly commercially active and growing, but can't reconcile that with the fact that the port actually also needs to expand one way or another. So these are challenges that won't be resolved here today. Councillors, we're not asking for a revolution to support this recommendation. We're asking for you all to help the process keep moving forward. There's no, I don't see any tricks, agendas or anything going on here. As the mayor who's retiring at the end of this term, I would like to encourage and support the new mayor coming through, whoever that is, and give them as much information and as reasonable a well-defined direction as possible, as well as most of you will be sitting around this table again in 3.5 months' time, and the new councillors who come in. So, you know, the point that I would make here is that whether you support the growth in the port or whether you are about constraining port activity, you need to continue to allow this debate to grow, to mature, and get more information in so that we make even better decisions in the following terms about the future of this port. So back to you guys, Rick. Thank you. You've actually shown how a mature city can have a really mature debate. Not one that's driven out of the front pages of a paper or out of talkback radio or out of Parliament, but actually amongst ourselves. And so even this discussion here today, it's not perfect, but it's a lot different from some of the discussions we've had here on this subject over the last 6 years. And this is a way for us to go forward, so let's just keep moving it forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brewer.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be calling a division on G because I believe that sends the council, the chief executive, on an unrequired job in the next 90 days, starting in the next 90 days, to firm up an option, and those options that have been written into the agenda are Manukau and the Firth of Thames. I believe, Madam Chair, that both those options are dogs, and this report spends most of it outlining just why they are dogs, why they are fraught with engineering challenges, with environmental challenges, with cultural challenges, with social challenges, with transport challenges, with fiscal challenges. Yet we are now embarking, instructing, although apparently this is not work, and apparently this will not require any resource or any cost, but nonetheless we are embarking on a process today to firm up one of these options. And I hear what Councillor Darby is saying about the flotilla of 1,000 people, or how many there were. Well, they were there largely not promoting the Firth of Thames or Manukau, and I've yet to see those flotillas. Maybe there's one at the Firth of Thames promoting it today, Councillor Fletcher, and one in Manukau. They were there about reclamation, and the first recommendation that most of us sign up to today is that there will be no further recommendation. That is what most of us agree to, and that is one of the top future port study findings, and what the CWG has confirmed. What the working group has also confirmed, Madam Chair, is that neither options that they've been forced to look at long term are satisfactory. And perhaps, ideally, what we now need to do is find a better option. Well, this work here doesn't give us the opportunity to go and find a better option. No, we're burying ourselves out the back of Manukau and in the Firth of Thames. And this would be like, Mr Mayor, the Wellington City Council today deciding that perhaps Parliament should either be in Porirua or Upper Hutt, and sending the Chief Executive on that mission to firm up the process and scope it and do a short list on that. Well, guess what? The new Wellington City Council and Mayor in October might not want their Parliament or whatever in Porirua or Upper Hutt, and that is exactly what we face here. I cannot see any ground support for a move. I can see lots of ground support, and I think it's been addressed by this chamber on reclamation. I think it's very clear, and I think the reports have articulated the views on reclamation and reflected what the majority of the community want. Tick. But no one in that flotilla was promoting the Firth of Thames or the Manukau Harbour from memory. And I would like to see now a democratic process of 90 days. This is a 50-year project report, Madam Chair, and that is what Rick has articulated to us today. It's not 30 or 40 years, it's a 50-year view. So if it's a 50-year view, and if the report says that we've got enough capacity short to medium term, and that there should never be reclamation beyond what's ever consented, then why spend the next 90 days on the eve of a local body election and a change of mayoralty trying to narrow our options down to the Manukau Harbour and Firth of Thames, when Dr. Boven has said that a better option, trying to find a better option, would be a more satisfactory outcome. I would like this debate to be, I know that it's been leaked to the media, but I would like this report to be absorbed by the public, to be debated in the community and town halls over the next 3 months, and just see,
Order, Madam Chair.
see how much...
It's a misrepresentation of Dr. Boven.
Point of
I want some clarification. Did Dr. Boven say the words as conveyed by Councillor Brewer just then?
It wasn't a direct quote, it was my interpretation. It's a debate.
No, there's an awful lot
Not
of...
a point.
Misrepresentation.
That's not a point of order.
No, misrepresentation of what's said by staff or members is a point of order,
I've
Councillor.
written down a direct quote where it says neither option is very satisfactory. Ideally, you'd try to find a better option. So I'd ask Councillor Darby to rewind the tapes and listen to what was said by our presenters. And Councillor Darby also argues that let's not stop governance. Well, last week he was in the CCO committee saying that we shouldn't appoint new CCO directors and give the mandate to the incoming council.
Right. Yeah, good.
So he was wanting to stop governing on that.
It would be really good if we could actually just
Thank you,
stick
Madam Chair, and I appreciate that you're not interrupting me just this once. But I would like to put up the division and call for a division on G 1, 2 and 3 because it's wholly inappropriate that this council makes these decisions around Manukau and the Firth of Thames when there is no public support for either, when we've been advised that ideally a better outcome should be found, when we've got a 50-year time frame, when the decision doesn't have to be made, when the issue of reclamation has already been decided and sorted and recommended. I believe we need to take a deep breath on this. I believe that this should be a part of the political debate over the next 3 months. And if the new incoming mayor comes in with a huge mandate to build a port in the Firth of Thames, then let's start the work. Until then, let's hold. It's not a case of doing nothing. It's just holding the report, giving it to the public to absorb, asking for feedback, and then for a new council and mayor on a completely fresh mandate to action the work. To action the work on Manukau and the Firth of Thames at this point of time is totally inappropriate and a waste of council resource and focus when there are such bigger issues that the public want us to appear on. And frankly, the issues in Auckland these days are around cost, around the transport, around housing, around the finances of the Auckland Council, and maybe if there is so much love for the Firth of Thames and the Manukau Harbour option, maybe a new mayoral candidate will come out and win off the back of that. But at this point, it is a non-issue and it should be put to bed for another 90 days.
Yeah.
So at this stage, we've had the correct amount of speakers according to standing orders. I can offer Councillor Darby a right of reply, but I'll just, before we do that, and a very brief one, no, you don't, I'm just going to ask for Dean just to clarify something that has been consistently repeated around the room that isn't quite correct.
Whether you choose to go with option 1 or 2 is entirely a political choice. There's no implication in either option 1 or 2 that a decision has been made. So it's certainly something we all need to be clear on. If you elect to go for option 2, what you're essentially agreeing for staff to go away and do is to identify third parties, independent third parties, one of whom would come back, one of whom the new council would ultimately select to do that piece of work identified in G3. You're also asking staff to scope up how you might approach identifying relocation triggers, but not doing the work associated with identifying the relocation triggers. And you're also asking staff to develop a process for investigating location options. So it's setting up the work that might occur subject to the next council approving that work and the funding to go with it.
Madam Chair, point of clarification.
Yep.
But there's no budgeting for this, allocated budgeting for this.
So there's been 2 concerns raised. First of all, the work that is proposed in G1, 2 and 3 is the work that we would normally do as part of our business as usual funding, because it's about identifying the scope of what might need to occur by others.
Okay.
Actually implementing it is a separate issue. Once the scope's determined, a budget can be agreed and then would need to be approved by future council.
Okay. I'm going to, we're
can I ask a
now at the
question?
stage, well, we've had speakers for, speakers against. Is it absolutely critical, councillor?
Well, I just want to know
Clarification.
from Mr. Kimpton.
It's very hard to hear with everyone else joining in.
Yeah, I just want to know from Mr. Kimpton, if the new mayor decided that this would be a project that could be run in-house within the council, could we do it in-house without having to go out to get independent third parties?
Absolutely, because you would there'll only be a recommending report, and you can choose as the future council what you wish to do with that recommending report.
Yeah.
That's why it's only at that level. It's not doing the work.
But it's
So I think that's clear. I think we've got all the clarity we can. Councillor Lee, question, quickly.
Madam Chair, I'm just concerned that with the intention to have an ongoing study or have the Chief Executive identify options in the Manukau Harbour and the Firth of Thames in the next 90 days, that the real work that needs to be done in regard to relocating or finding or identifying alternative sites for the bulk liquid, the farm, the tank farm, there's no mention of that at all. And I'm getting the impression that the council's sort of into displacement behaviour. We have a difficult political situation, so we have another study, and we're actually missing the point. There is a need to do some work on relocating the bulk liquid plant, the tank farm. Nothing has, this study didn't do anything about that apparently, but it is a pressing concern. It needs to be done by the council with all the planners we have in-house, and it needs to be done with some urgency to enable better development of the Wynyard Quarter. But instead we're going into some displacement behaviour about the Firth of Thames, for God's sake.
Councillors, we are, I think, straying a little bit. It's my understanding that this is within the scope of the work proposed, according to Mr. Kimpton. We'll take an answer from Mr. Victor, and then we'll put the vote, and we're going to do G by division.
So the way that I understand G3, I didn't propose G3, but the way that I understand it is what Councillor Lee is talking about. That is what that scope is about. If you want to deal with that shorter term issue, how would you go about it? And then put that to the incoming council and they can decide what they want to do or not.
There's a point in meetings where the questions keep going and they add to the confusion. My understanding is that we've probably gone as far as we can go. It's actually very, very clear. Mr. Kimpton has clarified the issues. We'll now put the recommendations and we'll put G as requested by division.
Right.
So I will move, or you've moved and
Up until F.
seconded.
Just
We've got A, we've got,
F.
thank you, councillor. I'm quite capable of working that out. I know that F comes before G. I've got that far. So we're doing A to F. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And then G, we're going to put by division.
Your Worship,
Aye.
Councillor Anai,
Aye.
Councillor Brewer,
No.
Councillor Casey,
No.
Councillor Cashmore,
Yes.
Just bring it down so people can, people should have it in front of them.
Okay. Lemire, yes. Anai, yes. Brewer, no. Casey, no. Cashmore, yes.
Yep.
Councillor Darby,
4.
Councillor Filipina,
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher,
No.
Councillor Crum, Councillor Lee,
No.
Member Namani, Councillor Penrose,
No.
Councillor Quacks,
No.
Councillor Stewart,
No.
Member Taipari,
Aye.
Councillor John Walker, Councillor Wayne Walker,
No.
John Walker was a yes. Councillor Watson?
No.
Councillor Wayne Walker?
You've already asked me.
Vote
Councillor
again, Wayne.
Webster?
Vote again.
Yeah, have another, have another.
Come on, you never get that opportunity again, Wayne.
Councillor Wood?
No.
Deputy Mayor Hulse?
I
Penny, did you see yours?
I do.
Let's have a look. Oh, no, sorry, I
Webster was a no.
I was a no.
Don't know why it's so hard today.
I voted no, is it
It's
all right?
lost by 10 votes to
So that,
I wouldn't go that far,
I think that we don't need to go back, that still sits comfortably within the process. That's just an extra addition that's been lost, but we know where we're going from here. So I'm going to call an adjournment of 1:25 through till 2, and there's a briefing downstairs on the infrastructure fund issue.
Everybody hear that?
So, and we'll do this now because we're coming back and we will be in confidence, so let's move this now. I will move it.
I'll second it.
Councillor Wood will second, I'll put that. All those in favour please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. That's lovely. Thank you everyone.